Chapter 41. As for Wei Wei's answer, it was actually within everyone's expectations. After all, someone like Morong Changfeng, who had a family background and an outstanding appearance, was hard to find in the entire capital. What's more, she'd always wanted to marry him. That's why people also didn't have anything to be surprised about and wanted to reach out and pull Helian Jiaoer up. However, at this time, Helian Vivian opened her mouth again. She stood in the middle of the courtyard without any makeup, her clothes fluttering. Her eyes looked straight at Morong Changfeng, pausing after each word. But, I want to break off the engagement. These few words were as light as the wind and clouds, but it was like a sudden clap of thunder that struck the crowd. Everyone was stunned and stopped their actions one after another. They looked at Helian Vivian in disbelief, their eyes full of astonishment. Helian Vivian still had an indifferent appearance. Second sister has always emphasized that I resent her because of you. Since this is the case, Morong Changfeng does not need to be sneaky in the future. As long as Morong Changfeng agrees to break off the engagement, I will naturally help you. Morong Changfeng's lower jaw slightly tightened. His body also stiffened. His pair of eyes firmly stared at her, hiding the billowing waves of anger. This woman unexpectedly really wanted to. Seeing that Morong Changfeng is not speaking, you should have agreed. Helian Vivian met his eyes and laughed mockingly. If it was not for Morong Changfeng today, she would not have known that this engagement would be so troublesome. The engagement that retired emperor gave, without special reasons, could not be broken off. Since Morong Changfeng wanted to beg her for his little sister Jiaoer, then she must make him pay a price. A word of forgiveness in exchange for her freedom in the future. It was worth it. You good, very good. Helian Vivian, you are really good. Morong Changfeng waved his long sleeves. The side of his face was as cold as a sculpture that had just walked out of the cold. Morong Changfeng, when did he become the person who sent himself to the door but was rejected? Moreover, she actually wanted to push him to another woman. Anger was his first reaction. If it was not for so many people watching, he would really strangle her to death with his own hands. The person who liked him was obviously she not? Now she pushed him away. Did this woman really think that he wouldn't do anything to her? Helian Vivian wrinkled her eyebrows. She didn't think that Morong Changfeng would have this kind of attitude. The one who didn't want to get married was obviously him. She didn't forget that if it weren't for his divorce letter, Helian Jiaoer and Helian Mei wouldn't have dared to beat her to death and throw her into the river. Although he was not the main culprit, he had never helped her even once. From the beginning to the end, he looked on coldly as a bystander and was extremely disgusted with her. Even if such a man was rare in this world, she would not want him. Nangong Lai, who had just finished the divination test, reached out and touched his chin. The corner of his mouth slightly curled up. The matter of breaking off the engagement was actually brought up by Helian Vivian. There's a problem. There's definitely a problem. Beligaju was still leaning against the flowering tree. He brought the teacup to his lips and slowly tasted it. The swaying branches seemed to have quietened down a lot. Aju, don't tell me you're not the least bit curious as to why Helian Vivian would do this? Nangong Lai thoughtfully tilted his head. According to my many years of experience, she must be playing hard to get. That's right, she's playing hard to get. I really couldn't tell that this little kitten liked Morong Changfeng that much. For him, she didn't even care about her reputation. Nangong Lai immediately stopped speaking. It wasn't because of anything else, but because of the man's pair of eyes, floating and sinking, as if brewing ice. He slightly leaned to the side, as if he was listening to him speak. One hand was casually stuck in his pocket, the other hand was lightly pinching the white porcelain teacup. It was obviously a languid posture, but when he did it, it interpreted extreme danger. Nangong Lai lowered his head and lightly coughed. Beligaju glanced at him, his eyes fogged up. His fingers clasped the teacup, unable to see whether he was happy or angry. Noisy. Just these two words made Nangong Lai's face stiffen. Hey, come back here and tell me clearly, who's noisy? This brother sees that you don't have any experience in relationships, so I'll analyze it for you. Let me say this first, you can't fight. I can fight with you using words. Beligaju didn't even pay attention to him anymore. Holding the teacup, he slightly used his strength. Nangong Lai touched the bridge of his nose. He wanted to follow, but he heard a bang. The big tree behind him seemed to have suffered a heavy blow. With a loud crash, it fell down, shaking up a thin layer of dust. When Nangong Lai saw this, he didn't dare to follow. With his back turned, he began to feel conflicted. In the end, who provoked a certain highness, and the people standing in the middle of the courtyard had already been shocked silly by Hellion Vivian's unexpected performance time and time again. Only Hellion Jiaoer, with a pair of watery eyes, fiercely glared at Hellion Vivian. Just as she was about to walk down with Hellion May's support, she heard Hellion Vivian gently smile and open her mouth. "Little sisters, it seems that you've forgotten something." "Hellion Vivian, I'm warning you. Don't go too far." Hellion May's usual temper had always been fiery. It was already not easy for her to endure until now. Now, any word from Hellion Vivian could light up her fire. Hellion Vivian looked at her and evilly pulled down her thin lips. "Do you know why I only picked out your blood jade at the very end? I wanted to know to what extent you would frame me. I really didn't expect that little sister could still be so self-righteous after the matter has been investigated clearly. Who gave you this kind of capital? Was it father, or these teachers who spoke up for you?" Then, I, Hellion Wei Wei, will also say these words today. Although grandfather has passed away, the Hellion family has also changed hands, and I'm all alone. Don't think that after framing me, you can leave without saying sorry. Even if that person has the support of countless teachers behind them and countless powers to shield them, I will still get the justice that I deserve. Her clear voice resounded throughout the Nine Turns Academy and didn't fade for a long time. Pa, pa, pa. It was like slapping everyone's face. Not only Hellion Mei and Hellion Jiaoer, but also those teachers who slandered her. As the cold wind blew, Hellion Wei Wei raised her head, her ink-black hair wantonly. Her long sleeves fluttered in the wind. Seeing this scene, Grandmaster Zi Zun's eyes were slightly red, but he was smiling leisurely. This child was truly extremely clever. What a good retreat in order to advance. What a good get the justice that I deserve. After all these years, how many grievances had his dear disciple suffered? Tu Su Feng looked at Hellion Vivian standing in front of him. Even in the Imperial Palace, he had never seen a girl like Hellion Vivian. She was as tough as her mother, but she had more tenacity and clarity than that person. Originally, he still felt pity for the Hellion family. He thought that the things that the old man had won were going to be handed over to someone else. Now, Tu Su Feng gently curved his thin lips. Perhaps, this little girl would be the only variable in this. Chapter 42. What are you talking about? Wei Wei, you're even scolding us old people with your words. A white figure walked over from afar. Hellion Vivian followed the sound and looked over. Her pupils abruptly shrunk, and the chilliness emitted from her body made Yuan Ming, who was hidden in the ancient book, shiver heavily. Who exactly was the person that came to be able to make this woman's mood fluctuate so much? Prime Minister Su. All the teachers walked over to him, one after another. Grandfather. Hellion Jiaoer also called out, feeling wronged. She then turned her back and cried until she was covered in tears. Su Jiacheng looked at his normally most filial granddaughter being bullied to this extent, and a malicious intent immediately flashed through his eyes. Turning his head, he beamed at Hellion Vivian and said, "Your two younger sisters are still young, and are at the age to play around. They don't know the severity of the matter, so it's hard to avoid making mistakes. You're older than them. If you had said earlier that poison bee wasn't yours, how could us old people have misunderstood you? Principal, what do you say?" Tu Su Feng didn't say anything. On the contrary, Grandmaster Zi Zun's eyes widened, clearly somewhat angered. Hellion Vivian tightly clenched her trembling hands. He deserved to be called the current prime minister. What a powerful mouth. That year, if it wasn't for this mouth, her mother might have been able to endure it. In order to support his own daughter, this Su Jiacheng, who had a human face but a beast's heart, actually bribed the Zhang and Li families, making them insist in the main hall that her mother was vicious and jealous and couldn't tolerate anyone. Ever since that day, The entire capital treated her mother as the laughing stock after a meal. She still remembered that at that time, her mother didn't even want to take a step out of the door. It wasn't easy for her spirit to get better, but this Su Jiacheng came over to make things difficult for them. Hellion Vivian's hands that were hidden under her long sleeves slowly loosened. She didn't know if it was because she was using the same body, but that grief and anger actually made her feel as if she had experienced it herself. However, no matter how deep her anger was, she had to endure it. This old fox in front of her wasn't easy to deal with. In the past, because she was angered like this, she couldn't control herself and did many foolish things. However, the current her was already different. How could she follow his script? Misunderstanding? Hellion Vivian said calmly, Prime Minister Su, you've used the wrong words. It's not a misunderstanding. You've wronged me. Su Jiacheng's hand paused. This Hellion family's little vile spawn didn't know how to appreciate favors. He already gave her a way out, yet she was still so serious. She was simply asking for trouble. Grandmaster, look at this girl's stubbornness. She's as stubborn as her mother. I've already admitted my mistake, but she still won't let it go. I don't know what to do. Grandmaster, you're the state preceptor of a country. Do you have a solution? There were so many people, yet Su Jiacheng didn't ask and only asked Grandmaster Jizun. This was because he had already heard before he came here that little vile spawn actually dared to curry favor with the Grandmaster during the examination. He was also an important official who assisted in the imperial court, so of course he knew the Grandmaster's temperament. Presumably, the Grandmaster already loathed her to the extreme and would definitely speak to this side. Moreover, even though Grandmaster Jizun never cared about the affairs of the country, he still had a pivotal position in the imperial court. If he could speak, then no matter how clever and eloquent that little vile spawn was, she could only shut her mouth and suffer a loss. A good-for-nothing young lady who had lost her power should know her place and stay put. If she rushed to find trouble like this, then don't blame him for being ruthless. Hearing what was said, Tu Su Feng's always gentle thick eyebrows creased tighter and tighter. Grandmaster had always been unrestrained and did things according to his own preferences. Yet he didn't know that his next words could very possibly cause that little girl from the Hellion family to bear an injustice. In addition to his influence in the academy, if even he denied Hellion Vivian, then in the future, Hellion Vivian would have to face the entire academy's ostracism. Thinking up to here, Tu Su Feng was just about to open his mouth. An aged voice rang out. Within the gloomy voice was an unprecedented anger. It's fine if you don't admit it, but you're still insulting this old man's disciple. Not forgiving when you're in the right? Hee. Today we're not forgiving when we're in the right. Whoever doesn't accept this, you can come find this old man to ask for advice. Who was it? Who was speaking? The tone was very insolent. For a moment, everyone was somewhat unable to react. When they saw Grandmaster, who should have been sitting in the seat of honor, shake off his footsteps and walk in front of Hellion Vivian, his intention of protecting her was very obvious. Everyone was shocked. Looking at Hellion Vivian, their eyes were filled with disbelief and astonishment. Originally, this old man didn't want to open his mouth. Grandmaster's face carried a deep displeasure. He really wanted to do as his disciple said and help her keep this secret. Only, what he didn't expect was that even though the evidence was already so obvious, these people could still be so thick-skinned and say that she's not forgiving when she's in the right. This made Grandmaster extremely displeased. Su Jiacheng, your Su family is simply going too far. Grandmaster's cold eyes swept around in a circle. No matter who it is, if they've done something wrong, then they must apologize. Not only do you not apologize, but you're also pressuring my disciple like this. Heh, I'd like to see, with this old man here, who dares to slander my disciple. After hearing these words, the teachers all heavily sucked in a breath of air. Even Su Jiacheng's legs were somewhat soft. How could it be like this? No matter who it was, they didn't expect Grandmaster to actually accept a disciple, and the one he accepted was even a trash from the Hellion family. It's over this time. Recalling the words they'd said before, every teacher's back was covered with a layer of cold sweat. They'd still naively thought that Grandmaster didn't find Hellion Vivian pleasing to the eye and simply didn't think deeper. Looking at it again now, all of them had misunderstood, and even in front of Grandmaster, they'd said that his disciple wasn't anything. Hellion Jiaoer and Hellion Mei's complexions were the most unsightly. Hellion Mei's hands even started to tremble. Before, she'd still ridiculed her in front of that trash, saying that she definitely didn't know that Grandmaster. But now? No, this was absolutely not true. Not to mention these outsiders who didn't dare to believe it. Even Grandmaster Zizun, who was rather familiar with Grandmaster Tu Sufeng, also didn't expect this development. His eyebrows slightly raised. She's really your disciple? When did you accept her? Grandmaster originally wanted to properly talk about the matter of being stunned by his own disciple a few days ago. But once he saw Hellion Vivian's cold gaze turn towards him, the old man instantly changed his words. I just accepted her. Just accepted her? Tu Sufeng clearly didn't believe it, and his eyebrows raised. Grandmaster straightened his chest. What? This old man just finds this little girl pleasing to the eye. So I want to accept her as my disciple. Is that not possible? Of course it's possible. Tu Sufeng's gentle and refined eyes seemed to be able to see through everything, yet he didn't expose it. That Hellion family's girl was actually able to suppress this old stubborn man. It was indeed interesting. Chapter 43. As for Su Jiacheng, he couldn't wait to find a hole in the ground and crawl into it. He had lived for such a long time, and had always held a pivotal position in the Dragon War Empire. This was the first time he was blushing from someone's words. Although he didn't know what kind of luck that little vile spawn had to make Grandmaster Zizun fancy her. But right now, he only hoped that everyone's attention would be focused on that little vile spawn and not mention the matter just now. As it happened, Hellion Mei had long been spoiled. She rushed in front of Hellion Vivian and shouted herself hoarse, "You did it on purpose. You deliberately made me and second sister look bad." Oh? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled. From the beginning to the end, it was third sister and second sister who framed me. How did I deliberately make you look bad? Hellion Mei completely lost her reason from her smile. From the beginning to the end, you were just pretending, you. Shut up. Su Jiacheng pulled Hellion Mei back with great strength and directly pushed away the imperial bodyguards behind them. He fiercely glared at her and secretly cursed. When this girl gets angry, she doesn't care about the situation. She didn't even learn the slightest bit of Jiao Er's temperament and scheming. This time, it would be difficult to deceive them. Hellion Vivian didn't need to think to know what he was planning. Did he want to leave things unsettled? How could there be such an easy thing in this world? It's said that Prime Minister Su has always been impartial. Now that your two granddaughters have framed and insulted me, I don't know how Prime Minister Su wants to deal with this. Hellion Wei calmly and unhurriedly blocked the guards who wanted to take Hellion Mei away. Just like that, she lazily stood on the main road, allowing no one to leave. The masters didn't say anything. Even Tu Sufeng and Grandmaster Zizun had a quiet appearance. However, their gazes were all cast on Su Jiacheng's body, bringing along an indescribable sense of oppression. Su Jiacheng knew that he couldn't continue to act like a fool. In his heart, he couldn't wait to skin this little vile spawn. This little vile spawn's one sentence pushed him to the heart of the struggle. If he didn't take out something, he was afraid that even his reputation would be damaged. He was a high-ranking official in the imperial court, and the biggest taboo was to lose his prestige. He didn't know why the other party had latched onto this point of his. But Su Jiacheng understood that this time, even if he couldn't bear to, he still had to put on an act in front of everyone. To think that he had been in the court for so many years, yet he was forced to such a state by a little bastard. Su Jiacheng bit down on the thin meat in his mouth, but his expression didn't change. Weighing the situation left and right, he calmly opened his mouth. Jiao Er, Xiaomei, grandfather knows that you two didn't sincerely plan to frame your eldest sister. However, your natural natures are mischievous and mischievous. You simply didn't care about the seriousness of the matter and spoke without thinking, causing your eldest sister to be wronged. If grandfather doesn't give Wei an explanation today, it will be against public opinion and etiquette. Since it was your mouth that made the mistake, you should give yourself 20 slaps and admit your mistake. Grandfather. At this moment, even Helian Jiaoer was stupefied. Her entire body trembled as she looked at Su Jiacheng. She didn't dare to believe that her grandfather would actually make such a decision. How could she continue to stay in White Academy after this? How could Su Jiacheng not know the consequences of this? In the end, he deeply shouted, "Still not making a move?" Helian Jiaoer stared blankly for a moment. Her eyelashes were tender and beautiful like a half-opened rose with moisture. The Empress had always doted on her. When had she ever treated her like this? Helian Mei's complexion greatly changed. She didn't dare to believe it as she turned her head, but what she received was her grandfather's cold and indifferent gaze. Helplessly, the person she was most afraid of was her grandfather. She didn't dare to not do what her grandfather wanted her to do, so she could only shrink her neck. Helian Jiaoer bit her lips until they were bright red. Tears welled up in her eyes. Ever since she was born, she had never suffered this kind of humiliation. She entered White Academy with first-place results and was sought after everywhere. Yet today, she had to slap her own mouth in front of everyone. This was all because of that little slut. If it wasn't for her, how could she have fallen to this point? Make your move. Su Jiacheng's voice weakened. In the end, he couldn't bear it and turned his back, not wanting to watch. Helian Jiaoer and Helian Mei had no other choice. They could only clench their teeth and slowly raise their hands under everyone's gaze. Once again, they slapped their own faces. Their eyes looked at Helian Vivian, overflowing with poisonous intent. Slap. Once. Slap. Twice. Hearing the sound of the slaps beside her ears, Helian Vivian only stood there calmly. From beginning to end, she didn't change her posture. Until 20 seconds later, Helian Jiaoer stopped her hand. She felt a burning pain on her face, as if everyone was looking at her. The thick sense of humiliation almost made her face change color. Right now, she only wanted to personally tear Helian Vivian apart. Su Jiacheng pressed down on her hand and secretly used force. Jiaoer, you and Weiwei are sisters. How can sisters have overnight hatred? You've always had a kind personality. Grandfather has always known this. Quickly go and apologize to your elder sister. This matter will be considered over. Grandfather. Helian Jiaoer's eyes were filled with tears. She knew that her grandfather wanted her to go and apologize in order to protect her reputation. However, to make her lower her head in front of that little slut, she really couldn't do it. Su Jiacheng lowered his tone. Quickly go. Yes. Helian Jiaoer took a deep breath. She moved like a lotus and walked in front of Helian Vivian. She wanted to maintain her delicate and pitiful image in front of others. However, she discovered that the corner of her mouth was extremely painful. She couldn't help but hate a little more. It was us who misunderstood elder sister. Helian Vivian looked at her and slowly smiled. Just like what I said to Prime Minister Su before, little sister, allow me to remind you again. It's not a misunderstanding, it's an injustice. You. Helian Jiaoer was so angry that her small face was distorted. She took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the viciousness in her throat. Elder sister is right. This little vile spawn. Su Jiacheng clenched his hand and amiably smiled in front of others. Seeing you sisters reconcile as before, this official is also happy. Helian Vivian looked at him with a smile. Prime Minister Su is right. This indeed makes one happy. Don't worry, everything is just the beginning. In the future, there will be more and more things that will make you guys happy. Everything that you guys stole from me and from my mother, I will personally take it back, little by little. Su Jiacheng also didn't know why, but when he faced that pair of eyes, he unexpectedly felt a trace of black energy overflowing from them. However, he didn't forget his own identity and stiffly smiled. Grandmaster Zizun, you're blessed. You've really accepted a good disciple. Zizun didn't give him the slightest bit of face and coldly said, Next, there's still the academy exam. Miscellaneous people can leave now. The smile of Su Jiacheng, who was called miscellaneous people, stiffened. His expression was as unsightly as it could be. Zizun didn't care about this and brought his own disciple to another courtyard. He wanted to see what kind of results the superior courtyard's exam would have. According to his conjecture, that stinky brat who lived in Ghost Palace should have appeared long ago. At this time, he should have displayed his skills at the superior courtyard. He must show him to his own disciple so that after she knew him, she could hide a little further away from that stinky brat. Chapter 44. However, Jizun miscalculated one thing. That is, the elusive His Highness simply didn't take the test at the superior compound. Instead, he took the test at the inferior compound and fine compound's martial test arena where no one went to watch. The Academy decided to separate the male and female tests for the sake of ensuring the fairness of the competition. But it also imperceptibly gave His Highness a convenient condition to conceal his identity. Because everyone's attention was only on Hellion Vivian, they wanted to see how she would make a fool of herself. Therefore, very few people would know that there was another test in the other compound. How could it be you? Zhang Shijie, who originally wanted to show off his skills in the martial chi competition, looked at the man standing in front of him and couldn't help but take a step back. Beligaju coldly looked down at him and didn't say anything. He slowly moved his wrist, handsome as a god, revealing an unconcealable murderous aura. Wait a minute. Zhang Shijie couldn't control himself and screamed out. He wouldn't forget how terrifying the other person was. This man was just like a venomous snake. It seemed that if he moved, he would immediately be swallowed into the other's stomach. The injury on his leg hadn't healed yet. The severe fracture was all bestowed by the man in front of him. But he didn't dare to say anything, because the other person's thick, oppressive feeling actually made him unable to breathe. Not only that, until now, he still hadn't investigated the identity of the man in front of him. He originally thought that he would be an expert hidden in the superior compound. But he didn't expect that he would actually appear here. Could it be that this person was also someone from the 4 great clans who infiltrated? No, it can't be. He'd seen all the people from the 4 great clans, but he'd never even seen this person in front of him. Zhang Shijie stared blankly at the increasingly approaching handsome man. The contempt in his eyes had long been replaced by shock. Who the hell are you? As if he wanted to spit out the shock in his heart, he madly roared. The end of his voice had some unconcealable trembling. On the other hand, Beligaju's thin lips curled into a cold arc. That ascetic and arrogant attitude seemed to be saying that he was not worthy of knowing his identity. Zhang Shijie could feel the murderous aura surging around him like waves. His legs couldn't help but tremble. He immediately threw away the sword in his hand and rolled off the stage, scared witless. He yelled, "I don't want to compete anymore. I want to forfeit. Did you hear that? This young master wants to forfeit." Bailey Jiaju also didn't give chase. He only stood in the same place, raised his hand and flicked his lapel that originally didn't have a trace of dust. His expression was languid, as if the one that escaped was merely a little white mouse. The 2 teachers looked at each other and were somewhat dissatisfied. Ever since they became teachers of the White Academy, they had never encountered such a situation. A student from the good compound who was about to break through to the fire class actually fled in panic in front of a poor student who hadn't done any martial chi testing up until now. If this matter were to spread out, it would be a disgrace to them as teachers. Because it was unprecedented, if other people found out, they would also lose face. They simply announced that Beligaju had won and didn't even let him do a martial chi testing. In any case, after a month, there would naturally be people who would give him a good look. As a result, when this matter spread to other people's ears, it became that the new poor student had good luck and met an opponent who forfeited. As for the truth, only Tusu Feng, who received the news, knew. After hearing the report, the corners of his mouth curled up. His tone was indifferent, subduing the enemy's army without fighting. He is considered a talented general. Who was the principal talking about? Su Jiacheng still hadn't left. He stood beside Tu Sufeng and tried his best to warm up the atmosphere. With such a talented general, this old man can introduce him to Lord Murong and let him take care of him a bit more. Tu Sufeng glanced at him. That glance made Su Jiacheng somewhat baffled. He didn't know if he was thinking too much. Why did he unexpectedly see a hint of ridicule in Tu Su Feng's eyes? That shouldn't be possible. Tu Su Feng had always been gentle. Thank you for your concern, Prime Minister Su. He's only a junior, and his conduct is a bit arrogant. He probably doesn't want to be taken care of by anyone. After Tu Su Feng finished speaking, he wanted to laugh. If he didn't remember incorrectly, that stinking brat didn't even reach the age of 10 and had already oppressed all the aristocratic young masters in the capital. Now, Su Jiacheng actually said in front of him that he wanted someone to take care of him? Hee. If Su Jiacheng knew that the person he wanted to take care of was that highness, who knew what kind of expression he would have? Su Jiacheng couldn't see through what the other was thinking. Seeing that he spoke politely, he didn't think much of it. Since it's like this, Principal, you can go ahead and do your work. This old man will stroll around a bit more. Prime Minister Su. Tu Su Feng opened his mouth to stop Su Jiacheng's footsteps. He said in a refined manner, "What Grandmaster said is correct. This is White Academy. Retired Emperor has also made a rule that any minister is prohibited from wandering around here. This will affect the mood of the students. If Prime Minister Su doesn't have any important matters, then please return. I still have matters to attend to, so I won't be able to properly entertain Prime Minister Su." Su Jiacheng, who had been rebuffed twice in a row, ground his teeth until they made a sound. He stood under the tree with a dark old face. Looking at Tu Su Feng's departing figure, his eyes were filled with unconcealable anger. Each and every one of you, who do you think you are? Now that there were only his own people left here, Su Jiacheng didn't have anything to hide. The teachers tried their best to curry favor with him. Senior Su, please calm down. The principal is still young. We can't do anything about it. Retired Emperor, that old man's thoughts can't be seen through. Letting such a young person become the principal, and for so many years at that, sigh. That's right. Some of the older great masters also chimed in from the side, their expressions rather helpless. Su Jiacheng put on a generous appearance. Forget it, they're all juniors. This old man also won't bicker with them. Actually, the information that I asked you to investigate, have you made any progress? Rest assured, Senior, this old man is at the superior compound. One of the great masters replied rather complacently, as long as the third prince enters the superior compound, the first person to get the news will be this old man. Su Jiacheng nodded his head in satisfaction. Good, very good. In addition, I'll have to trouble Great Master to take care of this granddaughter of mine. As he spoke, he extended his hand and patted Helian Jiao's shoulder. His heart was filled with hatred and heartache. That great master immediately continued, Miss Helian Vivian's innate talent is exceptionally good. Even in the superior compound, she's also a well-known figure. Senior Su doesn't need to care about what happened just now. This is only a small test. That trash is good at currying favor, so it's inevitable that Great Master will be momentarily muddle-headed and be unable to see through people. By the time Great Master understands, it'll be too late for him to hate her. After all, that Helian Vivian doesn't have the slightest bit of martial chi. She definitely won't be able to learn martial cultivation. Even this test was merely a fluke. Chapter 45. Although Su Jiacheng's mouth didn't say anything, his expression explained everything. What the teacher said was what he was thinking. However, this was White Academy after all. He wouldn't be stupid enough to admit his own thoughts in front of so many people. He only smiled and changed the topic. It's getting late. This old man should also leave. Leave the matter of sending this old man to this old man's two granddaughters. Everyone naturally didn't dare to have any objections. They only urged Helian Jiao and Helian Mei to definitely send Lord Su down the mountain. Clang. Once Helian Jiao left the academy, she couldn't suppress her anger anymore. She kicked away the bodyguard in front of her. The bodyguards knew that their master's mood wasn't good, so they didn't dare to say anything. Grandfather, Helian Jiao cried uncomfortably. Her flower-like face was beaten until it was unbearably red and swollen. Her eyes were brimming with venom. You always told us to endure a bit more. If we continue to endure, that little slut will climb all over my head. It's nothing for your granddaughter to suffer a little, but grandfather, look at her attitude today. She clearly wants to embarrass you. When Su Jiacheng heard this, his face changed. He first threw a tantrum at the bodyguards, then extended his hand and stroked Helian Jiaoer's back. Grandfather knows that you've been wrong this time. But Jiaoer, you must remember, your future riches and honor are indescribable. It's not worth dirtying your hands for such a little vile spawn. Grandfather's meaning is that I should continue to be on good terms with Lord Morong? Helian Jiaoer was always smarter than Helian Mei. Helian Mei was still in a daze when Helian Jiaoer more or less figured out the other layer of meaning in Su Jiacheng's words. Su Jiacheng smiled and nodded. It's good to continue to be on good terms with the Lord. However, Grandfather didn't come this time because of the Lord, but because of another person. There's news from the palace that in this year's martial chi competition, the retired emperor will secretly visit the Phoenix Pavilion to watch. Although it's called a test, it's actually a consort selection for the third prince. At that time, there will be many experts entering the capital. Not only will there be students from the White Academy, there will also be many experts from the people participating in the competition. You must win. The third prince is choosing a consort? Helian Jiaoer exclaimed. Su Jiacheng saw his granddaughter's joy in his eyes, and the corners of his mouth curved into an arc. Grandfather knows that you have feelings for His Highness. The retired emperor's eunuch has already spread the word that the third prince will also leave Ghost Palace and enter the academy to resume his studies. You're also in the superior compound, so you must think of a way to seize this opportunity and interact with the third prince more often. Grandfather. Helian Jiaoer blushed and pinched the handkerchief in her hand. She was bashful as if she was experiencing her first awakening of love. Su Jiacheng laughed heartily. You're still shy? Grandfather only knows how to make fun of Jiaoer. Helian Jiaoer acted like a spoiled child as she stamped her feet. Then she laughed, and her eyes carried a trace of pride. Daughter will definitely amaze everyone in the competition. Su Jiacheng looked at her appearance and seemed to have thought of something. His mouth slightly opened, and his pleasantly surprised expression couldn't be concealed. Jiaoer, could it be that you've advanced? Helian Jiaoer nodded her head, and her thin lips carried a smiling expression. Grandfather wanted me to drink that year, and it helped me. When I advanced, I always felt a warm current in my body. The people of the Helian family only have this little benefit. Su Jiacheng stroked his own white beard. Originally, I wanted to take advantage of this visit to the academy to have Grandmaster Zizun accept you as a disciple. However, looking at it now, that old man is also a muddle-headed worm. He didn't accept a genius like you, but instead accepted a piece of trash. Now, as long as Helian Jiaoer heard Helian Vivian's name, her heart would feel stifled. When I was at the defense department, I tested her quite a bit. She was indeed a hedonist, but she was an idiot who didn't know anything. However, today, speaking to this point, Helian Jiaoer paused for a moment before asking in a deep voice, Grandfather, do you think that the poison we put in her body before didn't have any effect? Could it be that she recovered her martial chi? Otherwise, with her ability, she definitely wouldn't be younger sister's opponent. Su Jiacheng was also thinking about this problem. However, very quickly, he shook his head. That's impossible. As long as someone is poisoned by the devouring heaven poison, they will completely lose their martial chi and their meridians will be damaged. Even with the help of an expert like Grandmaster Zizun, it would still be impossible for the originally damaged meridians to be healed. What's more, so many years have passed. That little vile spawn's body has already been emptied of all of her vitality by the devouring heaven poison. Ordinary fighting and killing is still possible, but it's simply impossible for her to cultivate again. This is because her meridians are already dead. In this lifetime, she will never have martial chi again. But Helian Jiaoer still wanted to say something. Helian Mei clenched her teeth and interrupted her. Second sister, that little slut was only lucky for a moment. I still have injuries on my body, so I haven't used all of my martial chi. She is also a little clever. I don't know what she did, but she made me stay there and couldn't even move. Otherwise, I would have already treated her as a cripple. How could I still let her be so arrogant? Helian Jiaoer also remembered that at that time, Helian Mei really didn't move at all. Second sister, she couldn't even light up the crystal ball. What martial chi could she have? She simply took advantage of the time when we weren't paying attention and used some underhanded method. Helian Mei was so angry that both of her hands were clenched. She wholeheartedly believed that Hellion Vivian played a trick. Su Jiacheng wrinkled his white eyebrows. This little vile spawn is indeed a little strange. However, you also heard what the teachers said just now. Her path won't be long. Without martial chi, no matter how smart she is, she won't be able to learn martial arts. Grandmaster Zizun will expel her sooner or later. Zhao Er, as a woman, you must remember to understand that your hands must be as clean as possible. Only by being a little softer will you be able to gain the favor of men. In the future, you will definitely be indescribably noble. Restrain your thoughts on His Highness and the air, understand? Hellion Zhao's eyes turned, overflowing with light. Zhao Er understands grandfather's words. It's just that Zhao Er is afraid that little slut will play some tricks on the martial chi testing platform. After hearing this, Su Jiacheng's eyes also flashed. Don't worry, there will naturally be people who will deal with her. Grandfather will make her regret participating in the martial chi competition. Really? Hellion Zhao's eyes lit up. Grandfather, what do you plan to do? Su Jiacheng patted her hand. His thin lips raised into a smile. Since ancient times, money can make even ghosts turn millstones. As long as we can bribe those teachers, you don't have to worry about this matter. You only have to take care of yourself. Even if you want to do something like dealing with Hellion Vivian, you have to use other people. Don't dirty your own hands. Grandfather's teachings are right. Hellion Zhao smiled and leaned over. Grandfather's idea is still the best. Once we bribe the teachers, whether we win or lose, it will be up to us. No matter how powerful that little slut's methods are, she can only kneel and beg for mercy. Su Jiacheng thought of that scene and also laughed. All right, although the martial chi competition is important, if we can't find the third prince, everything will be in vain. You must pay attention to the superior compound. I keep feeling that His Highness has already arrived. Chapter 46. This year, there are actually 3 new students from the inferior compound who passed the test. This is really unexpected. The teacher who was compiling the test data held the file in his hand. His face was full of astonishment. The previous year's report cards were still there. Every new student from the inferior compound who was able to pass the test generally chose auxiliary courses. But this year, martial chi and divination were both passed. This was truly a miracle. There were also some people who didn't care at all. It's only a moment of luck. You see, there's still one person's opponent who abandoned the competition. This doesn't mean anything. Then how should this reward be given? The teachers sat on the wooden chairs and looked at each other. They stroked their white beards, not knowing how to make a decision. In the end, they could only set their sights on the superior compound's master. After all, the reward given at the beginning was that the winner could directly enter the superior compound. But now, jumping directly from the inferior compound to the superior compound, this was a situation that had never happened before. This old man proposes to cancel this time's reward. The one who spoke was the martial chi master who was in charge of the superior compound. With a straight face, he said in a dignified manner, "We can't let some students who simply can't pass come to our superior compound just because of a moment of luck. Dean, you're the head of the compound. Even if you're young, you should also understand that if we give out the reward like this, it's very likely that it will cause the other compounds to be dissatisfied. What's more, White Academy's superior compound students have all been carefully selected over the years. In the future, maybe they'll be chosen by the battle spirit forces. We can't just casually arrange 3 students to enter like this and break the rules." Tu Su Feng calmly listened, one hand holding the teacup. His tone was flat. This principal believes that White Academy's rules are to do what one says. His expression didn't change at all. The corners of his mouth even carried a gentle smile, but the oppressive feeling that hit them in the face made all the teachers feel an enormous evil aura. The teachers present naturally weren't willing to see the dean and the superior compound's master contradict each other because of this kind of thing. They promptly interrupted. The reward is still a must, but Master Li Yan's considerations aren't completely without reason. Dean, you see how this works. Those 3 poor students still haven't bought enough things to enter the superior compound. Why don't we directly reward each of them with a set? It can also be considered as solving one of their troubles. This suggestion was very compromising. The superior compound's Master Li Yin naturally agreed. If it was up to him, it would be nothing more than a group of small characters without any power. In the future, they wouldn't have much future prospects. Giving them clothes would be a waste. Tu Su Feng didn't say much. He only curved his thin lips, and the corners of his mouth carried a bit of evil. Sooner or later, these people would regret today's decision. It was likely that they would never have thought that the 3 students they spoke of who relied on luck to win, one was this dynasty's young genius priest, and the other was the 3rd prince that they desperately wanted to rope in, Beligaju. At noon, all the teachers and students gathered in the trading hall to announce the results of the test. With regards to the matter of not being able to enter the superior compound, after a certain highness heard about it, he didn't have the slightest bit of reaction. The side of his grave and stern distinct face carried an arc of a smile that wasn't a smile. He looked indescribably handsome and demonically cold. Nangong Lai, on the other hand, was rather regretful. I heard that the superior compound has a lot of girls. I still wanted to go take a look. Hellion Vivian's expression was the most difficult for people to guess. The light in her eyes was rather gloomy. The teachers even thought that she was dissatisfied with the academy's arrangement. Just as they were about to open their mouths, they heard her ask in a clear voice, "Can't these clothes be exchanged for banknotes?" The teachers, "Ha ha, ha ha ha, Aju. Look at these old men's expressions. It's too funny." Nangong Lai was practically about to collapse from laughing. How much did this Hellion family's young miss love banknotes in the end? She made the teachers stare blankly. Interesting, truly interesting. So these are the people from the inferior compound. Truly, seeing once is believing 100 times. The person sitting next to Nangong Lai coldly humphed. His handsome face carried a mocking smile. He wore a Chinese silver gown, and the ornaments on his waist looked more luxurious than the others. When he stood to receive the award, Hellion Vivian could clearly feel the waves of martial qi on his body. When they brushed past each other, that person's voice didn't carry the slightest bit of warmth. Don't think that just because you defeated those defective goods from the fine compound, you really think that you're unrivaled under the heavens. You're still far from it. After he finished speaking, that person floated away. His light white gown slightly drooped, his long hair wasn't tied up or tied, and his pair of eyes seemed to conceal the source of disaster. Floating up and down, he was both good and evil. For a moment, everyone's gazes concentrated on his body. One after another, they started whispering to each other, their faces carrying obvious pleasant surprise. "It's him, Yuan Ling Xian." Yuan Ling Xian? Heavens, that's the young master of the head of the 4 great clans? I heard that Yuan Ling Xian reached Earth rank when he was 7 years old. Now that so many years have passed, even the clan heads of the 4 great clans aren't clear on how powerful he really is. Some time ago, he was even called to the imperial palace by the emperor to discuss how to resist the Xiongnu together. How could even he be at the superior compound? This is simply not leaving us, the common folk, a way to survive. The sound of gasps resounded throughout the entire courtyard. Almost everyone impatiently watched Yunling Xian receive the award, their mouths wide open. Hellion Vivian only casually yawned and indifferently sat in her own seat. One hand propped up her chin, and the mole at the corner of her eye faintly glowed. Bailey Jiaju sat by her side, his slender fingers twirling the black jade thumb ring. The sparkling sunlight shone over. Even his fingertips were sparkling and glowing. He didn't show the slightest difference, as if it didn't matter to him who appeared. Nangong Lai put his arm on the back of the chair and casually leaned back, a demonic smile on his face. The 3 people sitting together, no matter how you looked at it, gave people the feeling of unbridled provocation. This made Yunling Xian, who was standing on the stage, coldly narrow his eyes. The award in his hand changed shape. They really were a group of idiots who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Sooner or later, he would teach them a lesson. Look, those are the 3 people who won in the martial qi test. As soon as Hellion Vivian walked into the inferior compound's ancestral hall, many students looked towards her and whispered, "I heard that Grandmaster Zizun also accepted her as a disciple. I wonder if she can make an armament for me." Make an armament? Someone sneered, "Don't dream about it. Why don't you go ask around why Grandmaster Zizun accepted her as a disciple? Our inferior compound's face has been completely lost by her. Relying on currying favor with others to climb up, it's really enough." Bang! The sound of a stool rang out. The people in the ancestral hall instantly fell silent. Hellion Vivian handsomely retracted her leg. The corners of her mouth were half-hooked as she sat in the middle of the group of gossiping girls, looking at them with a cold expression. The girls looked at each other, their faces unspeakably awkward. They all turned their heads away and pretended to pick up the scrolls on the short table. Hellion Vivian felt that it was quiet. She directly laid down on the short table, her hands playing with some small scrap iron that resembled toys. Beligaju sat next to her. After seeing those small scrap iron, his eyes flashed. His ivory-white fingers reached over and pressed down on Hellion Vivian's wrist. Chapter 47. He pretended to be puzzled and asked, "What is this? It looks very interesting." Nangonglai opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something. Beligaju glanced over and Nangonglai instantly shut up. He only cursed in his heart. "You, a 7-year-old who played with all kinds of armaments, actually have the nerve to pretend to be a novice? Don't tell me you really didn't see what those scrap iron were for. There are countless of them in Ghost Palace for you to play with." It had to be said that a certain highness acting skills were really too good. That pair of deep eyes carried an unprecedented cleanness, making Hellion Vivian, this ace agent, not the slightest bit of doubt. She lazily explained, "It's for practice, an ordinary armament. It hasn't taken shape yet. When it's done, I'll give it to you." Speaking to this point, she paused, then said, "Consider it as compensation for seeing your body that day." Nangonglai didn't drink a mouthful of water and almost spat it out, choking until he coughed. This Hellion family's eldest daughter's way of doing things was really bold. In the capital, which family's young lady would bluntly say things like, "Saw your body?" It had to be said that a certain highness taste was really unique. "I'm looking forward to it." At first, Beligaju stared blankly, then he slowly smiled, his thin lips carrying a shocking evil. Nangonglai watched from the side and trembled from head to toe, starting to calculate how many days the Hellion family's eldest daughter could live. What he didn't expect was that Aju looked like his mood really was a bit better than before, so much so that he even gracefully arranged the scrap iron for Hellion Vivian to use in order. But this wasn't anything strange. A certain highness temperament had always been unpredictable. Even he didn't know what he was thinking sometimes. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows at the man's movements, indifferently said, "You just heard those people's words. Aren't you afraid that the things I make won't be presentable?" "Not afraid." With the same indifferent tone, Beligaju supported his face with one hand and continued to arrange the scrap iron for her with the other hand. His black hair was half hanging down, and the smell of books was blowing in her face. Hellion Vivian's fingers paused and took the scrap iron from his hand. "These things are not good. When I find something suitable in the future, I will make it for you." Since he believed in her, she should treat him differently. Beligaju was someone who had seen countless top-notch martial arts. Naturally, he also knew that this ice iron was somewhat damaged. However, his face had a hazy expression of not understanding, a lazy expression of pity. Hellion Vivian knew that basically all of the new students who entered the academy wanted to obtain an armament that belonged to them. However, due to the preciousness of armaments, the academy didn't equip all of the new students with one. Instead, all of the resources were given to the superior compound. Therefore, it wasn't strange for this man to want to obtain an armament. But Hellion Vivian kept feeling that something was a little strange. Right, she remembered. "When I first met you, didn't you bring your guards with you? How come in the end, you were reduced to not even being able to afford a scholar's hat?" Nangonglai's figure paused. It's over. Their identities were going to be exposed." Beligaju faintly extended his gaze. His tone was very indifferent, as if he was merely stating a fact. "I lost all of my martial chi. My family only helped me pay the academy fees. They only sent an accompanying bodyguard to follow me. After that, they didn't do anything else." When Hellion Vivian heard this, she suddenly had a feeling that they were in the same boat. She rather handsomely patted his shoulder. Don't be sad. In the future, they will definitely regret it. Nan Gonglai looked at her movements, and the corner of his mouth fiercely twitched twice. Eldest Miss Hellion, the one who will regret it in the future is you. There has never been anyone who dared to pat the royal's shoulder like this. Really? Beligaju retracted his gaze and slightly lowered his eyes. That hair was black and soft. At first glance, he simply looked like a freshly baked, obedient, and beautiful young man. Nan Gonglai's expression as he watched from the side was very tangled. Pretending? Too good at pretending. Does the retired emperor know that you're so good at pretending? On the contrary, Hellion Vivian stroked his head. The smile on the corner of her mouth was incomparably free and easy. Don't worry. With this big sister covering you, you'll be able to regain your face in a matter of minutes. After Hellion Vivian finished speaking, she saw Beligaju's shoulders tremble twice. She even thought that he was moved, so she extended her claws and stroked his head twice. What she didn't know was that Beligaju, who had his back turned, had a smile that wasn't a smile on his face. He almost couldn't hold back the pleasure that overflowed from his throat. Ah, this little thing, as expected. The more he looked at her, the more interesting she became. It made him more and more unwilling to restore his identity and go to the superior compound. The teacher has arrived. It wasn't known who shouted this, but the entire ancestral hall immediately quieted down. A great master wearing a white robe walked in, held an ancient scroll, and started the true meaning of the first class. Hellion Vivian didn't listen. Her fingers nimbly fiddled with those pieces of scrap iron. One could hear an extremely small but very regular sound. Probably because her movements were too beautiful, the sound seemed to have an additional kind of indescribable musical feeling in the ears. After the teacher finished speaking, he patrolled with his hands behind his back. When he patrolled to where she was, his old face sank. What are you holding in your hands? Hellion Vivian swept away the end of the scroll with a paw sound. Her expression was as light as the wind and clouds. For a moment, the teacher felt that his eyes were playing tricks on him. He used a white handkerchief to wipe his eyelids, then looked at Hellion Vivian's short table. Other than a brand new armament, there was nothing else. Could it be that he really saw wrongly? The teacher shook his head, put his hands behind his back, and said in a deep voice, "Concentrate, don't look around." Hellion Vivian absent-mindedly acknowledged. After the teacher left, she continued to fiddle with the second pile of scrap iron as if nothing had happened. After the entire class, the teacher wandered to Hellion Vivian's place no less than 3 times, but he didn't find anything. After class, only 2 figures were left in the ancestral hall. One of them was fiddling with the scrap iron on the short table next to him. His expression was indifferent, but his eyes flickered with playfulness. Nan Gonglai sighed in admiration as he stroked his chin. A girl who doesn't even have martial chi was actually able to make 3 armaments in a short period of time. During this time, she even stuffed strawberries into her mouth from time to time. She's simply abnormal enough. Aju, even that old man Tu Tian can't possibly reach this level, right? Beligaju stood up, his slender fingers brushing across those already in embryonic form of armaments. Thinking of what that little thing said, he smiled evilly. Indeed not bad. Huh. Nan Gonglai followed up. Wait, what you said not bad. Are you referring to these armaments or people? Also, what was going on with him just now? What did he mean by his family only helped him pay the hospital fees and only sent an accompanying bodyguard to follow him? It was clearly him who thought that too many people would be annoying, okay? That's why until now, those ministers and teachers were still anxiously waiting for the carriage sent by the imperial family, but they didn't know that this person had already arrived 1 step ahead of them. Chapter 48. Aju, I have to remind you that you're still the prince of the Dragon War Empire. Don't pretend too much, he won't be able to digest it. Even his hair is trembling. Beligaju glanced at him and returned to his cold and ascetic appearance. He then walked out of the ancestral hall. Nan Gonglai looked left and right. Speaking of which, where did that girl go? Why hasn't she come back yet? The people outside the ancestral hall were all resting. A girl heard Nan Gonglai's words and answered shyly, Are you asking about that Hellion Vivian? Hmm? You know? Nangong Lai curled his lips into a smile, like the wind. The girl's face was still red and she said softly, just now, someone saw Lord Murong send a servant to look for her. She should have gone to the Commerce Courtyard to keep the appointment. After all, she has liked Lord Murong for so long. No matter how tough she is in front of others, she will find a way to get back together. If you want to look for her, you can go to the Commerce Courtyard to take a look. Baligaju's slender fingers paused. He listened quietly, his face expressionless. Since she wants to get back together, it's not good for us to disturb her. Nangong Lai leaned back and smiled. What did I say? Loosening the reins to grasp them. This little girl's move is pretty good. Hearing this, the scrap iron in Baligaju's hand was slightly sluggish. Layers of veins broke on the iron body. Nangong Lai looked at him strangely. Aju? Yes. Baligaju's tone was indifferent. His face was cold. Nangong Lai touched the bridge of his nose. He didn't know why, but he felt that Aju was angry just now. Baligaju didn't pay attention to him anymore. He slowly walked out of the courtyard. His slender figure quickly disappeared into the boundless dusk. Your Highness. When no one was around, a shadow swept past the treetops and landed on one knee on the ground. Baligaju's eyes slightly swept over the people kneeling on the ground. The corner of his mouth was cold. Go and inform the royal army to wait for me at the foot of the mountain. Yes. Shadow paused for a moment before lowering his eyes to accept the order. A trace of astonishment flashed through his eyes. His Highness had been playing hide-and-seek with the retired emperor these past few days, but now he had the imperial army wait at the foot of the mountain. Did he agree to choose a consort? Sunset. People were coming and going in the trading compound. The manservant who was dressed like a scholar raised his chin slightly and looked at Hellion Vivian, as if he had given her a lot of face by coming to find her. Hellion Vivian, my young master said that he can let bygones be bygones. But you, think about it carefully. If this engagement is called off, there will be no room for negotiation. Are you done? Hellion Vivian's face was cold, and her tone was neither fast nor slow. If you're done, then hurry up and get lost. She wasn't unfamiliar with this manservant. He was always by Morong Chongfeng's side, always thinking of himself as superior. When he saw the noble ladies, he never saluted. If she had to say, this was all because he was spoiled. You. When had the manservant ever suffered this kind of humiliation? No matter who saw him, they would be polite. He represented Morong Manor's face, yet this woman actually didn't put him in her eyes. In the past, she would chase after him everywhere, asking him to bring news to the young master. Now, she actually asked him to get lost. Morong Weiwei, don't regret this. The manservant clenched his teeth and left in a huff. Hellion Vivian picked her ears rather disapprovingly. Her eyes swept over the surrounding people who were watching the play. With one hand in her pocket, she stepped into the street without a change in expression. She was naturally lazy and free. TSK, these people really don't have eyes. Yuan Ming's voice was as arrogant as usual. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. You're awake? It seems that you've recovered quite well. If you fight a few more rounds, I'll be even better than now. Yuan Ming licked the corner of his lips. His face was bloodthirsty. Hellion Vivian stroked the ancient book in her hand and lightly smiled. Don't worry, I've already thought of whose blood I'll release. Yuan Ming looked at the young girl in front of him with a devilish smile, his thin lips slightly curved. White Academy, you guys definitely wouldn't have thought that after a few hundred years, I would return. What did you say? Morong Chongfeng listened to the manservant's report. The teacup in his hand was almost twisted out of shape. The manservant was indignant. That woman who doesn't know what's good for her actually told me to get lost. Young master, it's not that I'm talkative, but this kind of woman, even if you have good intentions, it's still wasted. Morong Chongfeng was already upset. Now that he heard the manservant's words, his chest felt like it was being pressed by a stone, suffocating somewhat. He really didn't expect that when he had the intention to ask for peace, that woman would actually reject him. Crack. Morong Chongfeng ruthlessly smashed the teacup in his hand. The resulting splash of water splashed onto the manservant's face. The manservant was startled, his face pale, and he didn't dare to say another word. Murong Changfeng took a deep breath, his face revealing a disdainful expression. You're right. A woman who doesn't know what's good for her is not worthy of this lord's good intentions. He originally wanted to take her to see his father, but since she couldn't lift her head in public, then forget it. She only curried favor with Grandmaster Zizun. Did she really think that she could rely on herself? He wasn't anxious. Sooner or later, she would come back to beg him. Murong Changfeng glanced sideways at the manservant. Has Lord Father arrived? Prince has already arrived. He's currently talking with the masters. He'll come back once he's done. The manservant's voice fell. Emperor Murong walked in. He was wearing a Chinese court attire, exuding an air of wealth and prestige. Seeing his beloved son, his solemn face finally showed traces of a smile. Feng father. Murong Changfeng promptly stood up. Emperor Murong patted his shoulder. You did well. Just now those masters praised you for a long time. It's just some flattery. Murong Changfeng's cold and handsome face didn't change in the slightest. Emperor Murong fancied his beloved son's arrogance. Good, what Feng said is right. It's just some flattery. I came this time because I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to maintain a calm heart. Now seeing that you're so calm, Father is gratified. Oh right, where's Master Tu Lao? Why didn't I see him in the academy this time? Master is still looking for the genius he met at the Phoenix Pavilion that day. Murong Changfeng clenched his hands. I don't know what kind of person that person is, to actually make Master so concerned. Even when I came to White Academy, he didn't appear. Emperor Murong lowered his eyes and said, no matter who that person is, it doesn't matter. Although it's hard to become a martial cultivator, Feng don't forget. What you need to do in the end is to find a way to find the battle spirit forces, then become a member of them. Becoming a martial cultivator is only a springboard for you to enter the battle spirit forces. Father, don't worry. I've never forgotten what you said. When Murong Changfeng raised his eyes again, his face was full of determination. Emperor Murong nodded in satisfaction, stroking his beard. Feng have you heard of a person called Huan Mingxiang, a senior official of 3 dynasties? Chapter 49. Naturally, I've heard of him. Murong Changfeng glanced to the side, as if he was thinking of something. It's said that he's in White Academy, but very few people can recognize him. Father, why are you suddenly asking about him? Murong Wang's eyes flashed with coldness. Why would an elder of 3 dynasties hide in the academy, not caring about worldly affairs? There's definitely a problem here. According to what people say, the battle spirit forces are called spirits because they're mysteriously hidden in every corner of White Academy. Aside from retired emperor who knows their true identity, no one else can find out who they are. But there's one thing, they're definitely in the academy. Father's meaning is that this Huan Mingxiang is a member of the battle spirit forces? After Murong Changfeng thought of this conjecture, he somewhat couldn't control his emotions. But ever since I entered the academy, I haven't seen any proud and unyielding old man. Huan Mingxiang is a strange person, always appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Maybe he'll disguise himself as one of the academy's teachers. Murong Wang stroked his chin, deep in thought. But no matter what, he'll be in the superior compound. After all, this is the best place to enter the battle spirit forces. What you need to do is to treat each and every teacher with respect. I have a premonition that when a new student enters the academy, the battle spirit forces guide will definitely appear. Swish, swish, swish. In the northeast corner of the commercial park, an old man with a hunched back was holding a broom in his hand, silently sweeping the fallen leaves on the ground. This was a place specifically for students to read. There were many books and ancient scrolls. However, the descendants of famous families who had already been influenced by martial qi countless times didn't feel that this place was worth coming to. Except for Hellion Vivian. She lost her martial qi when she was 7 years old, so there were many things that no one taught her. Even if there was Yuan Ming, who killed a god, he was only a demon. He could only increase her battle strength, but those systematic martial arts still had to rely on herself. In such a large courtyard, besides the old man sweeping the floor, there was a young girl earnestly reading a book. Under the radiance of the setting sun, it was indescribably peaceful. However, no one noticed that when that ordinary-looking old man raised his eyes, a sharp light flashed in the corner of his eyes. He held the broom in his hand and unintentionally swept it in front of Hellion Vivian. He coughed heavily twice and pointed at the tall bookshelf. "Little girl, I see that you are taller than me. Can you help this old man take that book away so that I can clean it?" Hellion Vivian, who was concentrating on reading the book, didn't notice that there was an old man here. Seeing that his legs were really inconvenient, she stood up and took the ancient book. After giving it to the old man, she planned to continue studying. Unexpectedly, the old man in front of him suddenly disappeared. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and quickly looked behind her. The old man had already changed his posture. He hovered in midair with one hand behind his back and the other stroking his beard. His sleeves fluttered slightly, making him look like an immortal. His voice was deep and resounding. "This old man has been cleaning this place for many years. You are the first person who is willing to help this old man. This little girl has a good heart. It's just a small matter." Hellion Vivian's expression didn't change much. She reached out and put down the ancient book with a faint smile on her face. Yuan Ming narrowed his eyes. "Woman, this old man is not simple. You should be careful." Hellion Vivian gave Yuan Ming a reassuring hand gesture. She didn't feel that this old man had any malicious intentions. Years of living with firearms had given her an instinct to distinguish between danger and not. From this old man, she only saw bright eyes and interest. He didn't avoid her at all. This meant that the old man was safe. The old man seemed to admire Hellion Vivian's calmness. It was rare for him to smile. "Little girl, this old man never owes anyone. Since you helped this old man will also return something to you." As he spoke, he pointed at the tree branch and used the moved Song Shan Mu Yuan. It was condensed and heavy, strange and complex. It had the power to split mountains and split rocks. Hellion Vivian's eyes suddenly narrowed. Her body was like a shadow, agile and unpredictable. Like the shadow of a plum blossom, she drove the wind around her. She used chi to break the attack. The old man's eyes lit up and continued to attack. Hellion Vivian had always been very fast. Every move was nimbly avoided by her. However, she was still relatively unfamiliar with martial chi. Gradually, she felt that her strength was falling short of her desire. The old man took the opportunity to attack. When he thought that the outcome was already decided, he didn't expect that Hellion Vivian would use the move that he had used before. He was stunned at first, then put down the bamboo branch. He smiled and said, "Good, good, good. There is actually such a smart girl in this world. Wonderful, wonderful." Hellion Vivian smiled but didn't say anything. She had been wandering between the black and white for many years in the 21st century. She had already developed a superhuman memory. Naturally, she could apply what she had learned. When she was in battle, she could change according to the actual situation. She had been carrying a machine gun all year round in the Yunnan and Zhonghai regions. What kind of situation had she not encountered? Now that she was holding a branch, it was as easy as moving her fingers. Her heart moved at will. Every move she made was natural and handsome. "Come, come, come. I'll pass on another set of flames swallowing the heavens to you." He had waited here for so many years. Finally, he had waited for a good seedling that was to his liking. The old man laughed loudly in his heart. His face was also filled with unconcealable excitement. If it was this girl, she would definitely be able to learn his ultimate move. When she first heard the words "flames swallowing the heavens," Hellion Vivian's heart also brightened. In the Dragon War Empire, even a 3-year-old child would have heard of this secret art. It was said that this secret art had already been lost along with the retirement of 3 generations of elders, Huan Ming Xiang. Now, this old man unexpectedly wanted to pass it on to her. Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed. She naturally thought of the old man's identity. However, after a moment, she shook her head. "Flames swallowing the heavens. I still won't learn it." "Why?" Huan Mingxiang was greatly shaken. Could it be that she was the same as that arrogant brat in the palace, hating waking up early? Hellion Vivian smiled. Although I haven't been practicing martial arts for long, I've also comprehended a bit of truth. Elder Huan's flames swallowing the heavens should belong to the fire element. However, up until now, I've also sensed that my martial qi has nothing to do with fire. You. Huan Mingxiang didn't find it strange that Hellion Vivian would guess his identity. After all, this little girl was so smart. She was able to see through it with just a hint. Only, he rubbed his chin and suddenly wrinkled his white eyebrows. Your martial qi path is very strange. It's like you've suffered some kind of heavy injury. It's a bit nondescript, yet you can win by surprise. Girl, what exactly are you cultivating? After Hellion Vivian heard this, she smiled. In any case, my martial qi path is very different from this flames swallowing the heavens. In this world, there are many kinds of mysterious martial arts that can't be learned. Learning too many isn't necessarily a good thing. Who knows, maybe I won't be able to control myself and will suffer from qi deviation. The way I am right now is quite good. I'm comfortable practicing it myself, and I can use it easily. Hearing this, Huan Mingxiang stared blankly for a moment. Then, his eyes lit up as he looked at Hellion Vivian. Haha, I really didn't expect. In this world, most people who practice martial arts can't overcome the greed in their hearts, but you actually comprehended this truth early on. Truly a wonderful person. It's just that I fight a lot. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips and looked at the setting sun. It's getting late. Elder Huan, you should rest early. Don't always sweep the same place. It's easy to reveal your identity. Huan Mingxiang looked at the exceptionally bright ground under his broom. His face was endlessly shocked. After a long time, he extended his hand and stroked his white beard. It wasn't known who he was talking to, but his smile was quite thick. This girl is really incredible. Go to the Superior Compound and investigate this girl's identity. This year's battle spirit forces can take in new people. Replying to Elder Huan, she's not at the Superior Compound. The figure kneeling on the ground paused for a moment before speaking the truth. Huan Mingxiang looked back in astonishment. Not at the Superior Compound? Then which compound is she at? The Good Compound? Cough cough. The figure coughed twice. She's at the Inferior Compound. She's that Miss Hellion who casually fawns over people that you've recently been very hateful. Chapter 50. Huan Mingxiang opened his mouth wide, then slowly closed it again. His cheeks slightly puffed up. When did this old man say I hated her? I never did. In the future, if she comes here again, immediately notify this old man. Yes. The figure looked at the old man's departing figure with a profound meaning, lightly laughing as he shook his head. Elder Huan didn't admit it. How could Huan Mingxiang admit it? Rumors and slanders were truly harmful. The old man picked up the broom and continued sweeping the floor, only this time. His movements were clearly much more forceful, as if he was sulking. A perfectly good girl, yet the rumors were so unbearable. If she hadn't come to the trading courtyard this time, wouldn't he have continued to misunderstand? The more the old man thought, the angrier he got. He simply threw away the broom, the corners of his mouth carrying an evil smile. This year, we won't be choosing people from the Superior Compound. It's more interesting to go to each compound. Lest those people from the Superior Compound always think they're a cut above others. Night, Trading Courtyard Armament Shop. The manager looked at the more than 10 armaments in front of him, his eyes astonishingly bright. These were all made by Miss Weiwei yourself? Hellion Vivian indifferently grunted, lightly sipping the tea in her hand. 2 days. It's only been 2 days. The manager admitted that he was once again shocked. One must know that there wasn't a single newly promoted armament master that could produce so many armaments in such a short amount of time. Even among the current armament grandmasters, there wasn't a single one that could achieve this speed. This was too heaven-defying. Hellion Vivian took one of the armaments, looked left and right and said, "This one isn't made very well. Wait until class tomorrow. I'll take it apart and assemble it again." Okay. Whatever Miss Weiwei thinks is suitable, you can do it. The manager couldn't see where was good, where was not good. He only felt that disassembling an armament that made people feel awkward was like playing with a toy in her hands. If the disciples of other great masters knew about this, they'd cry themselves to death. Okay, you go ahead and do your business. Don't always disturb my time with my obedient disciple. Grandmaster blew at a corner of his white beard and extended his hand to push the steward out. Where was his usual dignified appearance in front of others? Wait until after the consort selection. All of you have to go home and rest for 2 days. I'm really afraid that after you go back, that big and small Hellion family will shamelessly bully you again. Disciple, listen to Master. If they dare to bully you, come back and find Master. Master will definitely stand up for you. Hellion Vivian chuckled. Master, you don't believe that I can handle it myself? I'm worried about you. Grandmaster sat down on his chair. So what if your martial chi is low? Can't we still make armaments with low martial chi? These people just couldn't eat the grapes and thought that the grapes were sour. They even said that this old man would definitely not be able to stand you and would chase you out of the sect? Heh, what a joke. They aren't me. Disciple, don't worry. Even if you don't have martial chi and can't pass the selection and can't make a martial cultivation, Master will not drive you away. I will still take care of you and give you money. Hellion Vivian knew that the old man really doted on her. This also made her even more determined to cultivate her own power. After being a big shot for so many years, she naturally knew that no matter if it was Su Jiacheng or Hellion Guangyao, mixing in their current position was definitely not by chance. If it weren't for their meticulous thinking and ruthless methods, they wouldn't have divided up the Hellion family's power and spread her mother's reputation to such an unbearable degree. Wanting to move them was definitely not an easy matter. Moreover, compared to dealing with them in one strike, she preferred to do it slowly. Slowly let them taste the taste of having their family destroyed and their people killed, the taste of falling to the bottom of the valley. However, what did she just hear? Consort selection? Hellion Vivian wrinkled her long, shapely eyebrows. What does this have to do with me? She didn't feel that as a good-for-nothing, she had any qualifications to be a consort selection. What happened to being a quiet and beautiful young lady? Grandmaster guiltily looked towards the beam of the room. Master also doesn't know why that side chose you. However, Master feels that since you've been chosen, you should go take a look at that royal family member. He's still not bad-looking. Is there any way for me not to go? Hellion Vivian didn't expose the old man. She only indifferently put down the teacup. She still had to do business. She really couldn't find the time to participate in some consort selection. Moreover, she was a second-hand good that had just had her marriage annulled. Wouldn't the royal family be afraid of provoking a fishy smell? Grandmaster lightly coughed twice. No, disciple, don't worry. That stinking brat has always disliked women. Moreover, his standards are very high. Even if you go, you may not necessarily be chosen. Hellion Vivian also thought so. Right now, she was only a bit whiter than a black coal ball. If it was like this, that royal family member could also choose her. Then she couldn't help but admire that man's sense of beauty. Wait a minute. What did he mean by that stinking brat has always disliked women? Could it be that the world-shaking third prince was actually gay? She seemed to have found out an incredible secret. In short, it's just going through the motions. There are so many candidates for consort selection. Grandmaster was still thinking of a way to persuade his disciple. On the other side, Hellion Vivian had already started laughing. Master, you don't need to say any more. I'll go. At worst, after going, she'd just sit down and sleep, and eat pastries. In any case, it was like what Master said. There were so many consort selection candidates. She was just there to make up the numbers. The next day, a gentle breeze blew, and the sky was clear for thousands of miles. Apart from the westernmost inferior compound, the other compounds looked exceptionally lively. Even the great masters had gone to the dean's place. They were so busy that they didn't have time to attend to them. Everyone was wondering if something big was going to happen. In the ancestral hall, the students sitting at the front and back tables were gathered together to discuss. Their faces were filled with eagerness and excitement. Hey, did you guys hear? It seems that the third prince is coming soon. Is that true? It can't be a lie, right? Doesn't the third prince never leave the ghost palace? The news from the superior compound definitely can't be wrong. Even if the third prince came, so what? He'll definitely go to the superior compound. Sigh. Some people sighed regretfully. Their faces were filled with disappointment as they looked out the window in a daze. Helly and Vivian didn't change at all. No matter who came or who didn't, she was still lying on the short table and sleeping. In such a large ancestral hall, she was the only one with one hand hanging down. She was sleeping as if there was nothing beside her. The chaos in the surroundings highlighted this scene's comfort and handsomeness. You guys look. She's sleeping again. The chattering changed the style of the discussion. The young girls lowered their voices. She seems to do nothing but sleep all day long. What else can she do? Don't forget, she doesn't have any martial chi. No martial chi, and so lazy. Some people shook their heads in disapproval. When the time comes, there'll definitely be no results. Regardless of the tide of criticism from all around, Helly and Vivian was still sleeping lazily. However, Yuan Ming laughed evilly. Woman, did you hear that? If you keep sleeping like this, be careful that you don't get any results on the test. Don't be noisy. Helly and Vivian closed her eyes. Her expression was indifferent. She had a commanding tone. Wait until lunchtime and then wake me up. Probably because she was a bit muddle-headed from sleep, Helly and Vivian forgot to hide her voice for a moment. When it fell into Beligaju's ears, he slightly raised his eyebrows. Chapter 51. Nangong Lai also subconsciously thought that Helly and Vivian's words were directed at Beligaju, so he looked in his direction in astonishment. He was drinking tea and reading a book, an ancient scroll that even a martial arts master couldn't understand. The color of the tea was light, the thin lips moistened by the tea had a glossy luster, and the focused and serious eyes were fascinating. Such a graceful man from the imperial family. After hearing the other person's words, the corners of his mouth slightly curved up as he responded, Okay. Nangong Lai was surprised. Ju, what are you doing? His voice was very small, so as to avoid being heard by others. Bailey Jiaju didn't say anything. Instead, he swirled the teacup in his hand and turned his head to look at her. A faint and restrained smile hung on his fair and handsome face, revealing a thick, perverted aura. When Nangong Lai saw this, he began to have goosebumps all over his body. When the retired emperor asked him to make a cup of tea, he had to make a decision based on his mood. When he was in a good mood, he would make a pot or two. When he was in a bad mood, he would directly make the retired emperor drink cold water. Like now, he was so willing to be ordered around. He was definitely addicted to being a hunter, and that prey was still dreaming. Thinking of this, he was once again glad that between the 4 great clans and the imperial family, he chose the imperial family. Otherwise, as long as he thought of confronting this man, he couldn't control his scalp from tingling. When he sat back in his seat, Beligaju was no longer reading the ancient book. He leaned back in the chair, his arm on the armrest, his fingers rhythmically tapping, as if he was thinking about something important. Then, he suddenly leaned over and moved close to Helly and Vivian's ear, smiling deeply. I told you to get up. Do you get any money? Helly and Vivian only felt a chill in her ear. It was numb and somewhat itchy. Only when she opened her lazy eyes did she know that because of Yuan Xiaoming, she made a stupid mistake again. No money. Helly and Vivian yawned. There is a free lunch. Do you want to go now? The corners of Beligaju's mouth were always curled up, and there was an incomprehensible shadow in his faint smile. All right, it just so happens that I don't have money to eat. Cough, cough, cough. Nangong Lai spat out a mouthful of tea. Your Highness, how can you say these words without blushing? However, Beligaju didn't lie. He really didn't have any money on him. Of course, just the little ring on his finger was enough to buy a city in the border area. Everyone knew that even though the third prince had lost his martial chi, he was still the retired emperor's most beloved prince, the War Dragon Empire's only holy son. Under normal circumstances, when people mentioned him, they would speak of him as high and mighty, holy and flawless, as if he was a god, etc. Most importantly, when had he ever lacked money? Nangonglai really couldn't listen anymore. He simply turned his head away and pretended to be deaf and mute. Beligaju only reached out and brushed the non-existent dust on his white robe. His gentle voice was like mellow wine, making people intoxicated. Let's go. Hellion Vivian also didn't think much of it. Her tongue licked her thin lips. She wanted to eat the roasted lamb right now, with cumin and some sauce. It was crispy on the outside and fragrant on the inside. White Academy's cafeteria was very clean, and they could even appoint a chef to give them special treatment. Hellion Vivian never treated herself unfairly in this regard. A table of meat, the freshest watermelon, and the best new hong. Eating in her mouth was incomparable happiness. After all, she brought someone to eat. So Hellion Vivian also didn't forget to give Beligaju a few chopsticks of food. If there weren't too many onlookers, this meal would be even more satisfying. Hellion Vivian bit the wooden chopsticks and looked at the man in front of her with a deep gaze. At such a young age, he had cultivated into a peerless young master. His every movement carried a strong masculine charm. Those hormones, the entire cafeteria was afraid that they would soon be unable to resist. The young ladies who came to eat looked at her as if they couldn't wait to eat her up. It really was a face that attracted bees and butterflies. Hellion Vivian also felt a little strange. Could it be that every time this person came to eat, he would be stared at by a group of girls? Wouldn't he have indigestion? Hellion Vivian didn't know that a certain highness had never come to any cafeteria. Ever since he entered the academy, all his basic necessities were arranged by shadow. The water was spring water from a mountain stream. The meals were all prepared by the best chefs in the imperial palace. They thought of a way to keep the food warm and sent it to the academy every night. That was why Beligaju wrinkled his thick eyebrows the moment he entered the cafeteria. Unfortunately, there were still people who didn't know the difference between life and death and came forward at this time. Really, wherever you go, you can see a bootlicker. We can't help but admire him for being able to do this. Don't you guys think so? The one who spoke was Hellion May. Beside her stood several other young ladies from famous families. Apart from her, the rest were all from the superior compound. Hellion Jiaoer was also among them. Her long skirt fluttered in the wind. She was as dainty as a drop of water. Even her voice was soft and gentle. Third sister, don't say any more. Why don't you say any more? Second sister, you're just too kind. That's why you're being bullied by this evil girl. No matter what, Hellion May would never forget the matter of slapping her own mouth. She looked at Wei Wei with eyes brimming with anger. Hellion Jiaoer also didn't really want to stop Hellion May. That was because she had long wanted to give Hellion Vivian a good look. Not to mention, when she saw Hellion Vivian and Beligaju together, her heart surged with unhappiness. In the end, what kind of luck did this little slut have to actually make friends with such a young master? However, no matter how handsome he was still just a poor and pedantic student. She heard that he couldn't even afford a scholar's hat. He wasn't like Morong Xiaofeng, who came from a wealthy family and was also successful at a young age. When Hellion Jiaoer thought of this, the light in her eyes turned. She made an appearance of wanting to say something but then hesitated. Third sister, eldest sister's friend, is still here. It's not good to misunderstand. As she spoke, she looked at Beligaju. The corners of her mouth carried a bashful and innocent smile. Young master, we meet again. And? Beligaju lifted his eyelids. His deep eyes carried fine lines, so deep that it made people fall into them in an instant. Hellion Jiaoer's heartstrings inexplicably trembled. Previously, at the superior compound, this man was just standing there. She felt as if his body carried a magical power. Now that she was close to him, listening to his voice, within the clear coldness, there was a low magnetism. It was clear and bright like the spring breeze in March. It refreshed the heart and refreshed the mind. There was a special kind of comfortable feeling. Hellion Jiaoer's heart was once again unbalanced. The corner of her mouth smile became even wider. After parting with young master last time, I haven't seen young master again. I don't know why young master went to the superior compound to look for me that day. Since she could make Lord Morong hate this slut, if it was another man, she could also do the same. Moreover, This young master had clearly taken a fancy to her from the beginning. If it wasn't for Wei Wei, this ugly woman, using money as a reward, it's likely that this young master wouldn't even spare her a glance, not to mention having a meal with her. This was simply a fantasy story. Helian Jiaoer was confident in her own beauty. After all, in this world, there was no man who could refuse her. Chapter 52. Her pretty face was slightly red as she lowered her head, like a budding lotus flower. Her beautiful eyes were shining as she looked at Bailey Jiaju, her eyelashes as dark as ink. However, what Helian Jiaoer didn't know was that the person in front of her was none other than His Highness, the Holy Sun, who had never been attracted to women. Any beauty in front of him would be ignored. In Nangong Lai's words, if His Highness wants to look at beauty, all he needs to do is look in the mirror every day. Other people really can't compare, regardless of gender. However, the strange thing was that this time, Beligaju looked at Helian Jiaoer's face and hesitated for a while. Helian Vivian frowned. She didn't think that the other party was a man who only looked at the face and not the heart. If he was like other people, then there was no need to eat this meal. The longer Bailey Jiaju looked at Helian Jiaoer, the more obvious the complacent expression on Helian Jiaoer's face became. Both of her cheeks were suffused with a pretty pink color. Her heart was thumping, and she was just about to open her mouth again. Bailey Jiaju rested his chin on his hand and furrowed his brows seriously. He asked unhurriedly, "Who are you?" His voice was very pleasant to listen to. It was cool and languid with a unique elegance. Anyone who heard it would find it enjoyable. But, "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" After hearing these three words, Helian Jiaoer's small face lost all color in a flash. Her pair of hands firmly pinched her handkerchief. The eyes that looked at Bailey Jiaju also changed from bashfulness to astonishment. In the end, she was so embarrassed that she wished she could just turn around and leave. Helian Vivian was also stunned. She turned to look at Beligaju's evil smile. This man definitely remembered Helian Jiaoer. It was because he remembered her that he deliberately asked this question. Amazing, too amazing. If it weren't for the others, Helian Vivian really wanted to give him a thumbs up and give him a thumbs up. It was rare to see such a black-bellied person in ancient times. Beligaju naturally noticed Helian Vivian's gaze on him. He curled his lips at her with a devilish smile. For a moment, Helian Vivian wondered if she should stay away from this man. After all, being too smart was dangerous. In the end, Beligaju knew what she was thinking when he saw her fox-like appearance. His smile disappeared, and his eyes were very confused. What's wrong? Nothing. Helian Vivian felt that she was overthinking. It was probably because the sense of crisis she felt when she first met this man was too strong, so she was always vigilant around him. Thinking about it carefully, this child was not bad. She should not have any opinions about others. Eat more. You don't know the others, so don't bother. All right, Beligaju responded faintly, but his lowered eyes were cold. He didn't expect that this little thing would still have doubts about him even after he had disguised himself to this extent. Disappointed? Heh, how is that possible? The more cunning the prey was, the more fun it would be to tame it. Beligaju curled his thin lips, and a scorching smile hung on his face. He was like a master sitting behind a tent. Because he was in control of everything, he had enough patience to wait. The most unbearable was Helian Jiaoer. She only felt that everyone in the dining hall was looking at her, including the young ladies she had befriended at the superior compound. She, Helian Jiaoer, had lived for so long, but this was the first time she had lost so much face. This made Helian Jiaoer so angry that her hands trembled, but she didn't know how to vent her anger. Second sister, what do you have to say to this man who can't even afford a scholar's hat? Helian Mei had stayed in the defense department for so long. Even if she was stupid, she still knew that she had to help Helian Jiaoer get out of this predicament. She looked at Helian Vivian with disdain. They're nothing more than passing hills. Helian Jiaoer received Helian Mei's message and immediately changed her expression into one of grievance. I only saw that this young master's clothes were shabby. Forget it. Forget it. We don't have the same background, so I was meddling. Shabby? Hellion Vivian's elegant eyebrows wrinkled into a knot. It was fine if they talked about her, but now even the people by her side were ridiculing her. Did they really think that she wouldn't get angry? Hellion Vivian held the bamboo chopsticks in her hand, and a trace of hostility flashed through her clear eyes. Eunuch Sun, who had just entered the dining hall with the superior compound's great master Jing Wuwang, was so scared that he almost threw away the horsetail whisk in his hand when he heard the word shabby. Seeing this, great master Jing was very baffled. Eunuch Sun, what's wrong with you? Do you think that the academy's dining hall isn't good? Regarding this point, Eunuch Sun can rest assured. When the royal family arrives, there will be a special chef here to prepare the imperial meal for His Highness. As he spoke, he stroked his white beard and smiled. Actually, Eunuch Sun didn't need to personally come here. There's this old man here, so there won't be any problems. Eunuch Sun wanted to cry but had no tears. Did you think that I was willing to come here? I accompanied the royal troops at the foot of the mountain and waited for a whole day. Now that I've waited until now, the person has appeared, but he's wearing a green gown and white cloth, blending into a group of students. When he just entered the dining hall, the pit of his stomach was already trembling. Okay? He swallowed 2 heart-saving pills in a row, and only then did he not lose control and scream out loud. How could His Highness, who should have stayed in the imperial palace, appear here? Why didn't he even say hello? He didn't have the slightest bit of preparation in his heart. He still hadn't finished looking at the layout of the academy, and he still hadn't gone to the dean's side. He still hadn't had time to reply to retired emperor's letter. In short, why the fuck didn't anyone inform him that the royal family had already entered White Academy and had even become an ordinary student? Could he return to the imperial palace right now and report to retired emperor that the royal family had already been found? After Eunuch Sun thought of this point, his entire person became excited. Just as he wanted to take a step forward, he was nailed to the ground by Beligaju's indifferent gaze. That gaze was extremely cold, and within that bewitching indifference was written a warning. Eunuch Sun was such a spirited person. He had spent most of his life in the imperial palace. Every word and action of his master, even if he couldn't guess 100%, he could still figure out 70%. Right now, His Highness clearly didn't want him to go over. Eunuch? Eunuch Sun? Great Master Jing saw that he was staring at a point in a trance and couldn't help but follow Eunuch Sun's line of sight to look over there. Then he smiled rather complacently. Is Eunuch Sun looking at that genius young lady of the Hellion family? Right now, she's already this old man's entry-level disciple. Eunuch Sun was originally still fretting about how he should pretend that he hadn't seen His Highness, but this superior compound's great master actually gave him a good excuse. He chuckled and nodded his head, forcing himself to withdraw his gaze from His Highness' body. He opened his mouth and said, I've long heard that the second young lady of the Hellion family is as beautiful as a fairy. Her temperament is adorable, and she's different from the young ladies of ordinary families. Seeing her today, she's indeed extraordinary. The great master is truly fortunate to have accepted a disciple with boundless prospects. You flatter me. Great Master Jing promptly waved his hand, but the smile on his face didn't diminish in the slightest. This child is actually intelligent. When it's time to select a consort, I hope Eunuch Sun will take care of her a bit more. Hearing the 2 words, select consort, everyone in the dining hall turned to look at them, including Hellion Vivian. Chapter 53. Seeing everyone's gazes, Eunuch Sun only felt a prickle in his back. This Minister Jing couldn't have brought up the matter of consort selection at any other time, but he just had to bring it up now. If he continued, maybe the royal family would really misunderstand that he'd received benefits from someone behind his back. Thinking of this possibility, Eunuch Sun immediately looked towards Beligaju's direction. His eyes sparkled with determination. Your Highness, you must believe in me. I'm loyal to you and will follow you to death. I've never accepted ministers. Cough, cough. Although I occasionally accept them, I won't accept them in front of you. Beligaju minded his own business and drank his tea. He didn't look at Eunuch Sun as he absent-mindedly played with the white porcelain teacup between his fingertips. It was as if it was transparent. Eunuch's son turned his back and almost burst into tears. Wu. He was disliked by His Highness. Minister Jing, who was closest to him, furrowed his brows in confusion. What's wrong with Eunuch's son today? Ever since the dining hall, he's been acting weird. Having missed the opportunity to attack, Hellion Vivian simply put down the bamboo chopsticks that she was about to raise. She wasn't stupid enough to make a move in front of Minister Jing. Before entering the academy, the dean had clearly said that doing bad things was fine, but absolutely couldn't be caught. This Minister Jing normally looked down on them from the inferior compound. He looked at everyone with a contemptuous attitude. Being so amiable like today was truly rare. This also showed that the old eunuch at his side wasn't simple. Hellion Vivian fiddled with the bamboo chopsticks in her hand, but her thoughts were pure. Minister Jing actually smiled and waved towards Hellion Jiaoer, saying, "Why haven't you come quickly to greet Eunuch's son?" Hellion Jiaoer was also an expert in this field. She promptly walked over like a lotus flower, faintly smiled, and was just about to open her mouth. Eunuch's son immediately exclaimed, "Miss Jiaoer, don't be like this. Aren't you tormenting me? The matter of His Highness's consort selection isn't something that we, as servants, can say anything about." As he spoke, his eyes flickered as he glanced in the direction of Beligaju from time to time. Beligaju still didn't look at him, but he finally changed his posture and leaned back lazily on the wooden chair. Eunuch's son's heart couldn't calm down. He really wanted to kneel in front of his master, hug His Highness's thigh, and cry. But after all, he was a eunuch who had been in the palace for many years. He was very good at observing people. He also knew that if he went over now and exposed the identity of His Highness, he would die even more miserably than now. Therefore, Eunuch's son could only brace himself and continue to deal with the old man and young man in front of him. Hellion Jiaoer certainly wouldn't believe these words of his. A long time ago, she'd already heard her grandfather say that although these eunuchs in the imperial palace were lowly, they still couldn't be underestimated. Especially this one in front of her, whose surname was Sunday. Many times, his words represented the intentions of those above. Clinging to him was equivalent to directly clinging to that highness. That's why she had to greet him with a smiling face. Otherwise, how could a eunuch like him, who couldn't be brought to the table, be worthy of such treatment from her? Eunuch's son is too modest. Who in and out of the court doesn't know Eunuch's son's ability? A few days ago, I followed grandfather into the palace and saw Eunuch's son from afar. At that time, Eunuch's son was accompanying His Highness the Third Prince, serving him in every aspect. If Jiaoer has the opportunity to enter the palace in the future, there are some things that Jiaoer doesn't understand that I'll need Eunuch's son's guidance. Hellion Jiaoer said these words bashfully. Her voice became softer and softer, and her cheeks became crimson. How could Eunuch's son not understand her meaning? During this period of time, the Su family had given him many benefits. However, he wasn't a little eunuch who had just entered the palace. What benefits he should take and what benefits he shouldn't take, he was very clear in his heart. This Hellion family's second miss actually had some good looks. Her background and appearance were all presentable, especially that pair of eyes that seemed to be brimming with tears. He pondered whether or not His Highness would like this type, so he kept an eye on her. After all, it was hard to say who would be favored in the future and who wouldn't. Since these benefits couldn't be refused, he would accept them all. It would also save him from not being able to get anything good when the time came. Of course, everything he did was always thinking of his master. If it was those who were ugly and had bad backgrounds, he wouldn't even mention them in front of His Highness. However, these were all his thoughts before coming to the cafeteria. Now, he only prayed that His Highness would spare his old life on account of his many years of careful and conscientious work. Eunuch's son's hands trembled as he looked towards Beligaju's direction again. Hellion Jiaoer saw that he didn't speak and was somewhat unhappy in her heart. She had already lowered her status to give this old thing face, but this old thing didn't even open his mouth. What was the meaning of this? Eunuch's son? What are you looking at? Hellion Jiaoer's patience seemed to have run out. Seeing that he was always distracted by Hellion Vivian's table, her long, shapely eyebrows slightly twisted. Does Eunuch's son know that young master? No. Eunuch Sun saw that His Highness's eyes had instantly turned cold. His heart and liver trembled, and he quickly put on a smile. I only felt that he looked familiar. After looking carefully, I discovered that I had mistaken him for someone else. This pair of eyes is getting more and more blurry. Hellion Jiaoer saw that the atmosphere was good and also followed with a smile. I am. Eunuch Sun can't possibly know that, young master. I also don't know what happened to the academy this year, recruiting so many commoners. It's normal for Eunuch Sun's eyes to be blurry. After Eunuch Sun heard this, his smile became even more unnatural. This time, he didn't even have the courage to look at the commoner. His palms overflowed with thin layers of sweat. Let's go stroll around somewhere else. It's too noisy here. Minister Jing's pure white sleeves moved, and his voice carried a smile. Eunuch Sun, please? Okay. Eunuch Sun immediately nodded. His appearance of wanting to leave as soon as possible made the others very puzzled. How could they know that if they continued to talk, he would really not have a corpse left? Minister Jing also didn't stay any longer. He only called for Hellion Jiaoer to accompany them. After the distinguished guest left, the dining hall returned to its usual atmosphere. Hellion May coldly glanced at Hellion Vivian. Some people, always overestimate themselves and have delusions of comparing themselves with second sister. She doesn't properly look in the mirror, thinking that everyone else is like her and only has eyes for the air. Now it's good. Second sister is going to become the third imperial consort, while a certain person has become a second-hand good whose engagement has been broken off. After she finished speaking, she quickly covered her mouth and reached out to lightly hit herself twice. Look at this mouth of mine. Big sister, I wasn't talking about you. However, as a younger sister, I have to remind you, even if no one wants you, you shouldn't find a poor and pedantic man to make do with yourself. Rather than this, you might as well say a few words to the air. In any case, you've already said a lot of things before. Maybe the air will be soft-hearted and forgive you. Chapter 54. Hellion May laughed heartily as she asked the young ladies standing behind her. They were holding handkerchiefs, their thin lips slightly curved. They looked at Hellion Vivian as if they were looking at a pile of mud that couldn't be lifted up. Hellion May proudly raised her chin. I won't say any more. The environment here is not good. Let's go find the chef to give us some special treatment. Let's go, sisters. Another string of light and ear-piercing laughter. However, before Hellion May's foot could take a step, she saw that her whole body seemed to be out of control. With a bang, she knelt on the ground. It was unknown whether it was the leftovers in front of her, but her face and hair were covered in oil from the fall. Miss, the maid beside her quickly went to support her, but she couldn't do anything. My face, my hair. Hellion Vivian, just you wait. Hellion Jiaoer couldn't control herself and screamed. She crazily rushed out of the dining hall. Hellion Vivian thoughtfully looked at the bamboo chopsticks that she hadn't used yet. She slowly looked at Beligaju's slightly condemning eyes and immediately expressed her position. It wasn't me? Is that so? Beligaju took back his hand. The water on his fingertips hadn't dried yet. He calmly wiped his hand with a white towel. Hellion Vivian believed that she was a good child who didn't lie. I wanted to help, but before I could, she fell. And Beligaju's tone was indifferent as he sipped a mouthful of herbal tea. The ground was too slippery. Hellion Vivian nodded. Indeed. AI. Speaking of which, it's a bit uncomfortable if I don't do it myself. How could she fall? On this side, Wei Wei was still at a loss. On the other side, Shadow, who was hiding in the dark, fiercely twitched the corner of his mouth. He didn't know why, but he always felt that the smile on the corners of his master's mouth made people feel very, very cold. He definitely wouldn't believe some nonsense like, the ground is too slippery. His Highness must have made a move. But thinking about it carefully, Hellion Jiaoer is going to marry the third prince. It's quite a good thing. Hellion Vivian seemed to have thought of something and suddenly smiled. Beligaju tightened his grip on the teacup, and his voice became cold. Make people happy? Hellion Vivian looked at him meaningfully. Don't tell me you don't know the reason. Shadow, who was hiding not too far away, stiffened. Why did he have a very bad premonition? This Hellion family's eldest daughter wouldn't say some shocking words to criticize His Highness to his face, right? Shouldn't he have stopped him? So that His Highness wouldn't be in a bad mood after hearing it? As if he was aware of his thoughts, Bailey Jiaju turned towards Shadow's position and glanced at him. That pair of ascetic cold eyes carried a thick warning. An Ing immediately shrunk back, and his back overflowed with cold sweat. The man turned his head. The side of his face was suffused with a graceful radiance. With a light tone, he casually opened his mouth. I really don't know. He actually wanted to hear the reason why she would be happy if someone else married him. Then I'll tell you this, but you can't tell anyone else. I suspect that the third prince, Hellion Vivian looked left and right, then lowered her voice. It's very possible that he has homosexual tendencies. PFFF. Ing almost couldn't breathe and choked to death in the corner. Homosexual tendencies? His Highness? He had a penchant for men? Ing raised his head and looked at the man's face not too far away, trembling with fear. His heart felt cold. Oh no. This time His Highness will definitely strangle this Hellion family's eldest daughter to death. This was even more unbearable than using 10 taels of silver to buy His Highness kiss. Beligaju also stared blankly. His good-looking thick eyebrows wrinkled, as if he didn't dare to believe what he heard. Not knowing if it was because of anger or something else, he unexpectedly smiled demonically. What did you say? I said that the third prince, that guy, might have homosexual tendencies. Hellion Vivian sized up the man with a glance, her thin lips slightly curved. Hellion Jiaoer marrying over won't gain any benefits. You, on the other hand, if you can also participate in the consort selection, you'll definitely be chosen. Relying on your face, seducing that third prince is still not a problem. Good, very good. What a good thing to be chosen. What a good thing to be seduced is still not a problem. Beligaju's long and narrow peach blossom eyes dangerously narrowed, carrying an unclear light. Where did you find out that the third prince has homosexual tendencies? Everyone knows that third prince has never been close to women. It's said that even the people who served him in Ghost Palace were all youngsters. If it wasn't for him being gay, he's a young and vigorous man. At the very least, he should have a servant girl to accompany him in bed, right? Hellion Wei's suspicions were also well-founded. However, this conclusion made Beligaju coldly laugh in his heart. There will be a day when he will let her properly experience his young and vigorous. Hellion Vivian saw that the man didn't speak and thought that he was shocked by the secret she revealed. Sure enough, no matter if it was the ancient era or the modern era, no matter if it was a man or a woman, regarding this kind of matter, they would always enjoy gossiping. Hellion Vivian revealed an I understand expression and patted Beligaju's shoulder. You don't have to be too surprised. If you feel that you can't hide this news after hearing it, you can also tell other people. Relax. Beligaju indifferently glanced at the hand she placed on his shoulder. His thin lips curved into a half-smile. I will find an appropriate time to tell other people. However, that other person wasn't anyone else, but you. When Hellion Vivian heard this, she was just about to say something, when she heard a burst of muffled laughter from the small door on the left. Hellion Vivian looked at Nangong Lai, who was standing at the door, and raised her eyebrows. Nangong Lai raised his hand and swallowed the laughter in his throat with great difficulty. He cleared his throat. You guys continue to discuss, continue. Don't worry about me. You can completely treat me as if I don't exist. Ha 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 ha. Fortunately, he came back early. Otherwise, he would have missed such a good show. It was simply too interesting. When he returned, he must personally ask Aju what it felt like to hear someone say that he was gay. Ha ha ha. No. He wanted to laugh again. What is he laughing about? Hellion Vivian was very puzzled. Beligaju indifferently looked at Nangong Lai. He raised the teacup in his hand and lightly took a sip. He is laughing at his own death. Nangong Lai's body suddenly stiffened. However, Beligaju paused and suddenly laughed. I think that the third prince must be very, very interested in what you said. How could I be stupid enough to say this in front of him, unless I don't want to live anymore? Hellion Vivian indifferently gnawed on the newly arrived roasted lamb chop. She was very disapproving. Nangong Lai and Shadow laughed at the same time. Then what are you doing right now? It's already too late. You definitely, you are definitely dead. Beligaju unexpectedly curved his pale lips. That kind of smile was arrogant and charming, as if he had found a very interesting toy. Chapter 55. A smart hunter would always treat his prey with extraordinary patience. Bailey Jiaju displayed this point incisively and vividly. He didn't do anything to Helly and Vivian. After the two people finished eating, they went to do their own things. The difference was that after Helly and Vivian left, Beligaju turned the black jade thumb ring on his finger and coldly ordered the kneeling Shadow, "Follow her and see who she has been in contact with these 2 days." Yes. Shadow accepted the order and retreated. Nangong Lai touched the bridge of his nose and took a step forward. Before he entered the inferior compound, he saw Eunuch Sun in the most remote corner of the compound. He was like an ant in a hot pot, walking back and forth with a horsetail whisk. The back of his collar was full of sweat. It was clear that he had been here for a long time. After seeing them, Eunuch Sun's eyes lit up. With a thump, he knelt on the ground. "Your Highness." Beligaju's voice was indifferent. "Eunuch Sun is the third prince's favorite. How can you kneel just like that?" Hearing this, Eunuch Sun almost burst into tears. "Your Highness." Was Master making fun of him? He was about to be scared to death. "Get up." Beligaju casually took 2 steps forward. From afar, he could hear 4 cold words. "Just this once." Eunuch Sun's scalp tightened. He quickly swallowed his saliva and respectfully responded, "Yes." Seeing that the crisis was resolved, Nangong Lai returned to his casual appearance. "Eunuch Sun, long time no see. How did you provoke your master?" "Young Master Lai." Eunuch Sun saluted and looked back and forth at his clothes. Nangong Lai naturally noticed his gaze. With a wicked smile, he tugged at his green and white robes. "I look handsome like this, right? Your master's idea was to disguise myself as an ordinary student so that I could flirt with those young ladies." Eunuch Sun cursed in his heart. The one who wanted to flirt with the young ladies was clearly you. Nangong Lai let out a long sigh. "It's also wrong to be too handsome. I'm already dressed like this, but I still can't resist falling in love at first sight." The corner of Eunuch Sun's mouth fiercely twitched for a moment, and a fake smile appeared on his old face. This old servant remembers that retired emperor once said that the vice principal of White Academy this year should be you, young Master Lai. Cough. Nangong Lai heavily coughed. "Anyways, I need to first familiarize myself with the Academy's environment. In addition, I need to properly protect your family's master. You don't know how much hatred has been stirred up ever since Aju entered. Those people from the superior compound have long found Aju unpleasing to the eye. Right now, they're holding back their energy. How can I abandon your family's highness at this time?" When Eunuch Sun heard this, he wasn't anxious, but angry. Who dares to look down on his highness? Let's go look for them now. A bunch of little bastards want to rebel, don't they? Nangong Lai rubbed his chin. "That Jing Wu Wang who accompanied you to eat today is the mastermind." Eunuch Sun's neck shrunk back. Looking at his family's highness gaze that fell on his body, the cold sweat on his forehead overflowed again. "Your Highness, this old servant swears that this old servant really isn't familiar with him at all." As he spoke, he glanced at Nangong Lai again. "Young Master Lai, you're basically pushing this old servant into the fire pit. After going around in such a big circle, it was all for the sake of trapping him. How could that be?" Nangong Lai extended his hand and placed it on his shoulder. He devilishly winked his left eye. "You can rest assured that your family's master is clear in his heart. He doesn't need anyone to push him." This time, Eunuch Sun's entire body stiffened. His family's master's pair of eyes were so mysterious and unpredictable that it really made people's legs go weak. "All right, don't waste any more time. Your family's master still needs you to do something." Nangong Lai unrestrainedly withdrew his hand. Beligaju's tone was still indifferent as before. "What excuse did you use to leave the superior compound?" This old servant said that he ate too much and needed to go to the toilet. Eunuch's son hastily said, "Your Highness can rest assured. Even if this old servant was given 100 guts, this old servant still wouldn't reveal your identity." Beligaju glanced at him. "You've been in the toilet long enough. You can go back now." Eunuch's son opened his mouth and finally clenched his teeth. "Your Highness, regarding the consort selection, He originally wanted to say, "Your Highness and retired Emperor have been playing hide and seek for such a long time. When do you plan to end it? The Imperial troops have already been waiting at the foot of the mountain for 2 days. If you continue to wait, you'll be discovered sooner or later." But forgive him, he really didn't have the courage to ask. "At dusk, this Highness will go down the mountain." Having heard this, Eunuch's son incredulously raised his head. He only had time to see the fluttering sleeves. The sun was setting in the west. It was still the same old place. In the sparsely populated courtyard, many ancient scrolls were placed on the bookshelves. The old man was sitting at a high place, looking at the finished meditating Hellion Vivian with satisfaction. He reached out and stroked his beard. Because her meridians had been damaged, every time Hellion Vivian advanced, her face would turn white from the pain. This time was no exception. Her forehead was full of sweat. "Girl, if you're too tired, take a rest first." Huan Mingxiang had never seen a girl like this child. Smart and willing to endure hardships. Hellion Vivian smiled, leaped up, and reclined on the chaise lounge. She lazily stretched her waist. "I can sleep here. At night, I'll have the energy to eat and drink." "Eat and drink?" Huan Mingxiang wrinkled his white eyebrows, seemingly inadvertently inquiring. This old man heard that the royal family is coming to White Academy. The young ladies of other families are all thinking about how to succeed in the selection. "What? You're not on the consort selection list?" Hellion Vivian yawned, her voice vague. "There is, but I personally am not very interested in marrying. Moreover, a man like the royal family is completely not my cup of tea." "Good girl. It's great that you can think like this." Huan Mingxiang immediately stood up, as if he had met a confidant in his life. "That person is good-looking, but he's too hard to fight. You can't expect him to have any normal logical thinking ability. Whatever you say, he'll act as if he didn't hear it. If you stay with him for too long, you'll be angered to death by him." After Hellion Vivian heard this, she rubbed her chin and expressed her regret. It seems that besides that good-looking face, the royal family doesn't have any other good points. "It's good that you understand." Huan Mingxiang patted her shoulder, rather gratified. "Don't be confused by his face." Hellion Vivian smiled. "I really couldn't tell that the royal family would be a pretty boy." When Shadow heard this last sentence, his foot clattered and he almost fell from the tree branch. He simply couldn't believe his ears. What did he just hear? Pretty boy? They said that His Highness was a pretty boy. No, he had to fly back and report to His Highness. After a while, in a corner of the inferior compound, amidst the lingering smell of sandalwood, only a vague figure could be seen, in the middle of being served and dressed. He seemed to have just woken up. His voice carried a unique magnetism and hoarseness. "Pretty boy?" Chapter 56. Your Highness, this isn't what this subordinate said. This subordinate is only reporting. Shadow wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Bailey Jiaju unhurriedly straightened his sleeves. He was still sitting in an indifferent manner, but he gave people a kind of majesty of a monarch overlooking the world. "Those two people are actually birds of a feather." Yes, yes," Shadow answered while lowering his head. He really didn't know what to say. Before, those two people didn't speak at all, but because they mentioned Your Highness, they seemed to have found a common language. "Your Highness, what kind of enmity did you have with Master Huan to make him blacken you like this? Continue to watch. If there are any problems, come and report to me." Beligaju gracefully propped up the side of his face, just like a rare breed of Persian cat. Every movement of his showed his nobility. Shadow lowered his eyes. He first walked a few steps outside, then turned back. He endured and endured, but in the end, he couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness, That year when Master Huan wanted to accept you into the battle spirit forces, why did you refuse him? Beligaju yawned again and said in an indifferent tone, because I promised him I had to get up early, because I promised him I had to get up early, because I promised him I had to get up early, because I promised him I had to get up early. Your Highness, because of this reason, you offended 3 generations of elders, Huan Ming Xiang. Shadow's face stiffened, and 3 lines slid down his forehead. The other shadows hiding in the dark glanced at each other, their eyes filled with obvious speechlessness. Their Great Highness, sure enough, everything he did was unexpected. Beligaju didn't take this seriously. He closed the ancient book in his hand and stood up from the wooden chair. Time's up. Leave the hospital. Yes. When it came to serious business, the shadows all had serious expressions. Like ghosts, they scattered and hid in every corner of the academy. At the foot of the mountain, a purple-gold palanquin blocked all the light, luxuriously standing still under the shade of a tree. That palanquin was surprisingly large, and outside the palanquin were suspended tassels. Beside the palanquin stood a total of 8 shadow guards in dark clothes. They held scimitars in their hands and wore fur coats. As their cloaks fluttered in the wind, there was an indescribable coldness. The palanquin servants were dressed very well. They did not look like ordinary officials at all, but they were more low-key than expected. However, the strictness in their movements was not something that could be done by just anyone. That was an aura that only the royal family could support. All of a sudden, the steed let out a long neigh and everyone stood up. That person casually walked over from the mountain, one hand in his pocket lazily, the other playing with the silver mask on his fingertips. His side profile was handsome as if it was carved by a knife, full of indescribable nobility, like a broken crystal, handsome beyond compare. A muffled sound rang out. The shadow guards in dark clothes knelt on the ground in unison, and the scene was indescribably soul-stirring. Your Highness, Beligaju looked at everyone coldly. With a turn of his finger, a silver mask covered his face, and only 2 words were written on it. Admission? Yes. Another muffled sound rang out, and the shadow guards in dark clothes returned to their previous positions. They held scimitars, mounted their horses sideways, and crushed all the fallen leaves on the ground. The lanterns were lit, and the night scene was flourishing. This kind of prosperity could only be found at White Academy. In order to welcome the distinguished guests, the elders of the superior compound had arranged everything early on. The servant girls and servants shuttled back and forth, holding fruit platters and eating brocades. Although they were in a hurry, they were orderly. Each of the young ladies from influential families had their skirts fluttering in the wind. Their figures were like willows, and their facial features were picturesque. Located in this red-walled and blue-tiled courtyard, they were like blooming flower stamens. Among them, only Hellion Vivian did not dress up. She was still wearing the Academy's green and white robes, but she did not wear a scholar's hat. She held a book in her hand and yawned from time to time. Different from Hellion Vivian, the other young ladies' hearts were beating extremely fast. Their hands were holding handkerchiefs tightly, and their faces were bashful. Their eyes were jumping with impatience. One had to know that the person coming in a moment was from the royal family, a man that many young ladies yearned for even in their dreams. For today, there were already many people secretly working hard. Although nothing could be seen on the surface, underneath, there were indeed hidden waves surging. This kind of banquet actually gave them the opportunity to form cliques and cliques. The smart people were exchanging greetings with each other, laughing and whispering. Many of the young ladies surrounded Hellion Zhao's side, inquiring her about what the elders had said. Her clear and melodious voice was actually very pleasant to hear. Hellion Zhao curved her lips into a smile, like the moon surrounded by stars. Her mood was originally very good, but when she saw Hellion Vivian in the corner, her eyes suddenly tightened. Why did this slut also come? People from the inferior compound simply did not have the qualifications to participate in the consort selection. What's more, she had already made arrangements with her grandfather. Right now, on Eunuch Sun's register, Hellion Vivian should have long been removed. Why did she appear here? Helian Jiaoer clenched the handkerchief in her hand. Her delicate little face was suffused with a cold tint. When everyone saw that she had stopped, they naturally also looked in the direction she was looking at. Isn't this the eldest Miss Helian who was chasing after the heir 2 days ago? Truly, seeing once is better than hearing 100 times. She's involved in everything. The girl who spoke was also a student from the superior compound, the Minister of Revenue's Fong Tingting. She was bosom friends with Helian Jiaoer. She looked gentle and beautiful, but her words were full of harshness. Relying on her family's power, she had previously bullied Helian Vivian. In any case, she was only an orphan, and there was no one who would stand up for her. Fong Tingting saw this point and laughed mockingly. Some people really should have a bit of self-awareness. They don't know what kind of occasion they should come to and what kind of occasion they shouldn't come to. Their hearts also don't know how to weigh the pros and cons. Helian Jiaoer pulled on her sleeve, white teeth biting her lip, with a face of embarrassment. Sister Fong, don't say any more. Second sister, don't stop Sister Fong. Some people just need to be beaten, Helian Mei said while gnashing her teeth. It was all because of this slut that she had a cut on her forehead and had no choice but to let down her hair. She couldn't even comb her hair. Originally, today was a good opportunity to stand out, because not only would the third prince appear, even those noble young masters would also appear. She had admired the legendary young master Lai for a long time, so much so that she hurriedly ordered a set of lake blue brocade long dress, just so that she could dress up beautifully. But all of this was ruined by Helian Vivian, this little slut. Fong Tingting patted her hand and glanced at Helian Vivian with disgust, as if she was some kind of evil trash. All right, if you don't want to say it, then don't say it. In any case, I, as your older sister, also disdain to lower myself to the same level as a pair of broken shoes that have been rejected. Hearing Ting Ting say this, I actually feel that it's strange. A girl who has had her marriage annulled doesn't have the qualifications to choose a consort, right? The other young ladies from aristocratic families also followed suit. She has curried favor with Grandmaster Jizun. Wouldn't everything be settled if Grandmaster Jizun put in a few good words for her? That's true. Hee hee, but this kind of girl, I reckon that the third prince won't even give her a glance. Wave after wave of ridicule. Helian Jiaoer stood among them, lightly hiding her smile, her beautiful eyes looking at Helian Vivian, waiting to see her make a fool of herself. Chapter 57. But what she didn't expect was that Helian Vivian just sat there absent-mindedly with one hand behind her. Her green and white robes were scattered on the floor, looking indescribably beautiful. She didn't take them seriously at all. This made the Helian Jiaoer's face change color. If it was before, this cheap woman would have already lost her temper and flipped out. That way, everyone would know that she was a spoiled brat. But now, she actually ignored them like this. The Helian Jiaoer fiercely clenched her teeth. Could it be that when she pushed her into the water tank that day, she injured her brain? Had she forgotten even the most basic reaction? This cheap woman clearly went crazy when she heard words like, His Highness doesn't want her. Why was she so quiet today? Murong Changfeng was sitting at the other end of the long table. After noticing the commotion, he didn't want to easily look at Helian Vivian's reaction. When his eyes fell on Helian Vivian's face, his heart twitched without warning. She actually had this kind of expression. She was like a spoiled cat, but it made people's hearts itch with coldness. Her eyes would slightly narrow because of her smile. Her thin lips would flicker under the candlelight, making men want to rush over and kiss them. She was no longer that annoying sticky cream from before. Her body revealed a kind of unfathomable temperament. These past few days, he hadn't seen her and also didn't think about her. Even if he did think about her, it was just to pester him. He briefly thought about all kinds of things when he met her. It was nothing more than her being noisy, pestering him and shamelessly pestering him. He was the dignified Princess Murong's heir. How could he marry an orphan who had lost her power? There were countless powerful ministers in the court, but she was the one who stuck to him. She was undoubtedly the only stain on his body. No matter how he thought about it, he couldn't accept it. That was why he made that kind of decision. But he didn't think that because of a divorce letter, she would stop all of her previous actions. Even the way she spoke and looked at him was different from before. The current her actually made him feel unfamiliar. Unfamiliar to the point that he was a little at a loss. Fang Tingting naturally noticed Morong Changfeng's gaze. She clenched the handkerchief in her hand, her heart filled with jealousy. The person that His Highness normally hated the most was that love-struck fool. How could he look at her with that kind of expression today, as if he was going to like her? She was obviously an ugly and lowly waste. If he didn't rely on the Hellion family's hundreds of years, how could that kind of lowly woman enter His Highness's eyes? Sisters, it's better for us to keep our mouths shut, lest someone becomes unhappy and runs to Grandmaster Jizun crying and complaining. Fang Tingting's words. To remind Morong Chang's what kind of woman Hellion Vivian. Sure enough, Morong Changfeng wrinkled his thick eyebrows, his handsome face showing disdain. On the contrary, Hellion Mei was very righteous and awe-inspiring. If you want to complain, then complain. Who would be afraid of her? In this world, there must always be justice. Third sister. Hellion Jiaoer tugged at Hellion Mei's sleeve again. Her pair of eyes were misty. Her long eyelashes drooped down, appearing very kind and moving. In fact, her heart was already blooming with happiness. Fang Tingting chuckled. Jiaoer, don't let these flies affect your mood. In a moment, the third prince will be here. You're the only one who has ever come in contact with him in the palace. We'll be waiting for your good news. Sister Fang. Hellion Jiaoer bashfully stamped her foot. When she turned her head, she looked at Hellion Vivian with obvious pride. Hellion Vivian didn't even look at her. She continued to yawn lazily. She already knew that although it was a consort selection, but in everyone's heart, the answer was already certain. Beligaju would definitely choose Hellion Jiaoer. Therefore, this banquet was just a formality. Fang Zheng was just as the elders had predicted. A man born in the imperial family, what he valued the most was the country. Hellion Jiaoer wasn't just talented and beautiful. The power behind her also couldn't be ignored. From this point of view, the third prince was bound to choose such a woman. Even if that wasn't the case, Hellion Vivian didn't have much interest in the consort selection. She only came today to go through the motions. In any case, it had nothing to do with her. As long as she appeared at the banquet like this, she would be worthy of the position that her master fought for her in her hometown. Seeing that it was almost time, the masters had already sat down in their respective seats. The steaming hot pastries were also placed very delicately. The legendary third prince, who was supposed to be selecting a concubine, did not even show up. It really was like the saying, tall, rich, and handsome, had always been arrogant. Just as she was thinking this, she heard a loud voice from outside. The royal family has arrived. The entire courtyard instantly quieted down. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the door. Hellion Vivian also slowly turned her head. When that tall and straight figure appeared at the door, the faint moonlight scattered on the side of his face. He was like a god from ancient times, elegant, cold, and aloof. He was draped in a black cloak with a purple riding suit inside. His trousers were stuffed into his black war boots. The expensive robe was embroidered with a cloud dragon totem in silver. It was extraordinarily exquisite. His long black curly hair draped behind him. He didn't look feminine at all. Instead, it made him seem more languid than usual. Everyone was stunned, regardless of whether they were men or women. Their shocked gazes didn't stir up the slightest ripple on his body. His expression didn't even change. It was as if he didn't hear those sounds. His deep black eyes were like an ancient well. They were bottomless and seductive, emitting a faint sense of abstinence. He seemed to always be like this. No one could approach him. He was always indifferent, aloof, and aloof. Hellion Jiaoer was most infatuated with this appearance of his. She saluted him like a girl from a noble family. Her white embroidered skirt was slightly scattered, setting off her pair of beautiful eyes. It was as if water could drip out of them. Your Highness. Hellion Vivian knew that Hellion Jiaoer did this because she wanted to show that she was different from the other beauties. She wanted to tell everyone that she and the third prince had some kind of friendship before. Minister Jing laughed heartily. He was very respectful towards Beligaju. Your Highness, please take a seat. Beligaju didn't say anything. The pair of eyes under the silver mask seemed to be looking for something. When they fell on the corner, they flashed a trace of playfulness. Eunuch Sun had been paying attention to his master's reaction. He was afraid that this Minister Jing would say some nonsense again and let His Highness thoroughly throw him into the cold palace. Therefore, he was more nervous than anyone at this banquet. A thin layer of sweat had already overflowed from his forehead. Now, he saw his master's thin lips smiling, yet not smiling. He almost couldn't bear it and kneeled on the spot. What kind of situation was this? His master's smile just now made his scalp numb. Chapter 58. It was very obvious that Beligaju's arrival changed the atmosphere of the entire banquet. This time, the dean didn't appear. Instead, Minister Jing accompanied him the entire time. Many of the great teachers were wondering whether or not the dean was going to lose his power. Although it was said to be a consort selection, the third prince didn't seem to be in a hurry. Eunuch Sun was a person who could handle the situation. He didn't need Beligaju to open his mouth to take care of everything. Following Minister Jing, he was reserved. Minister Jing originally wanted to strike up a conversation with Beligaju, but when he actually saw him, he was somewhat timid. He wasn't an inexperienced youngster, but in front of this young prince, he didn't know why. But there was an indescribable sense of oppression. The entire banquet was divided between men and women. On the left were the young masters of the capital from the superior compound, while on the right were the young ladies from the prestigious families. In modern terms, this was an upper-class dinner party. What should be done when gathering? Just eat, But none of them moved their chopsticks. This made Hellion Vivian feel very conflicted. She came to eat a free meal, but she didn't even get to eat a bite of dessert. This was too much of a failure. But before she could finish regretting, someone stood up from his seat. His small body was full of vigor. Master Jing, when will we start eating? I'm hungry. In a flash, everyone's gazes focused on that little person. Apart from those senior brothers and sisters from the superior compound, all the new students who had just entered the school all showed a surprised expression. They still hadn't forgotten who this little person was. When they first entered the compound, he even took a meat bun and sent a person flying with a kick. But this wasn't the main point. The main point was, how did he have the guts to pick on Master Jing's thorn at this time? Even if he had the dean's support, wasn't he a bit too impudent? Eunuch Sun originally wanted to ask where this little brat came from. He didn't know how to look at the situation, but when he calmed down and looked, his hand trembled and he almost dropped the thing. Wasn't that the little highness? How could he be here? Mom, what's up with that bald head? Where's the little highness' silk-like black hair? Where did they go? Where did they all go? The little one did not care about how others were looking at him. His lotus root-like calves were exposed outside of his white training clothes. His cheeks puffed up as he asked again in all seriousness, when exactly is the meal? If it's late, I'll go to the kitchen and eat before coming back. Eunuch Sun was speechless. Sob, sob, sob. After coming to White Academy, their family's little highness had been starved to such a state. No, when he returned to the palace this time, he must bring his little highness back. Jingwu Wang saw that Eunuch Sun was frowning as he looked at the little one. He thought that Eunuch Sun was disgusted by the little one's rudeness. He had long found this little baldy brought by Tu Su Feng unpleasing to the eye. He might as well take advantage of this opportunity to teach him a lesson. Jingwu Wang squints his old eyes, his face showing displeasure. Kong Chun, sit down. Hearing this, the little one's chubby face wrinkled into a ball. However, he didn't follow Minister Jing's words. Instead, he stood there and showed what he wanted to eat. Being refuted like this, Jingwu Wang's old face was about to lose. He was so angry that he almost stood up. When the Hellion Jiaoer and Feng Meier saw this, they looked at each other one after another and lightly laughed. This little senior brother, you should sit down first. If you stand up again, you'll be lacking in etiquette. At that time, the dean will also be in a difficult position. Listen to the big sisters. This kind of situation can't be allowed to have a temper. The Hellion Jiaoer followed up and said, fortunately, Master Jing's temper is good. If it was someone with a bad temper, you would have been punished. The two people's words sounded like they were helping the little one out of a predicament, but in reality, they were helping Jing Wuwang criticize this little thing who didn't know how to appreciate favors. He was only a disciple brought by the dean, yet he was so arrogant in the courtyard. Even if his martial chi was stronger, he should have been disciplined a long time ago. How old was he? He didn't listen to anyone's words. Letting him eat this lesson now would also let him know who in the end was in charge of White Academy. Those senior brothers and sisters of the superior compound wouldn't say anything. First, they were wise to protect themselves. Second, they knew that the person brought by the dean absolutely wasn't simple. Some time ago, all the martial uncles in the courtyard had been beaten up by him. Although they didn't know who he was, they could roughly guess that he was most likely the successor of a large family. Because from the first day they entered the academy, this little one had been raised in White Academy. The people who knew were few and far between. This wasn't something an ordinary person from a famous family could do, unless they were born with an extremely illustrious background. However, right now, no matter how illustrious they were, it was useless. It was Master Jing who didn't see eye to eye with him. They also couldn't possibly offend a master of virtue and prestige in the academy for a little one. The little one looked left and right. His little face became tighter and tighter. His stomach was hungry, so his patience was extremely poor. Even his ears followed and drooped down, a sign that he was about to explode. Eunuch Sun saw this and felt distressed. He didn't know what to say, so he could only desperately give his master a meaningful glance. Beligaju lowered his eyes and played with the ring on his finger. He didn't look anxious at all. When Eunuch Sun saw this, he knew it was over. It wasn't that the little highness was done for, but rather that the Fong family was done for. Without waiting for Eunuch Sun to think about this, a cool voice sounded from the ground, without any emotion. His stomach is hungry, so of course he has to eat. What's more, a child can't withstand hunger. He just wants to eat something. You guys are talking about this and that. Do you think that because the dean isn't here, you can bully little senior brother? It was Helian Wei Wei. She was standing behind the little one. Her left hand rested lazily on the little one's shoulder, sharp as a blade. She swept her gaze over everyone, and finally her eyes fell on Minister Jing. Master Jing, you can't really be thinking like this, huh? Minister Jing's face turned white from that kind of gaze. Helian Jiaoer followed up. Elder sister, how can you accuse Master Jing like this? I don't think Master Jing meant it that way. Didn't mean it that way? Helian Wei Wei laughed and raised her eyebrows. Then I would like to ask my younger sister. Since you didn't want to take advantage of the fact that the principal wasn't here to bully little senior, then what were you guys doing just now? She thought that she was ruthless and lazy and would do all kinds of evil. If someone hit her once, she would return it 10 times over. Her purpose for coming to this banquet was very clear. She was just here to make up the numbers and not participate in any intrigue. However, she really couldn't bear to see a group of people ridiculing a little bun, a child. They really could do it. Helian Jiaoer was stifled by her words. She didn't know how to refute, so she simply didn't say anything. This could be considered an unexpected gain. Just now, she wanted to provoke this little slut, but she didn't fall for it. Now, she actually stood up for a little thing. This was something she didn't expect. However, what the royal hated the most was people who didn't know how to look at the situation. She wanted to see what kind of end this little slut would end up in. Helian Jiaoer lowered her head, and a trace of viciousness flashed through her eyes. Even if he made progress, so what? He still didn't know what to say at what time. That debauchery couldn't be removed. This was destined to be that little slut's Achilles heel. Minister Jing seemed to have grasped this point, and he adopted the attitude of an old man. Helian Vivian is talking nonsense. This old man only told him to sit down, so as to avoid offending the royal. When Bailey Jia Ju heard these words, he finally raised his eyes and very, very slowly glanced at Jing Wuwang. Chapter 59. That gaze was extremely cold. Minister Jing was still in a daze and didn't notice the deep meaning in Beligaju's eyes. Helian Jiaoer was looking at Beligaju's side profile. Her red lips were smiling with a thick sense of schadenfreude. The royal was getting impatient. Sure enough, Beligaju's thick eyebrows furrowed, faintly and without a trace. Hellion Vivian's expression didn't change as she stood there. She had an expression that said, "If you like it, then watch it. If you don't, then punish me." She knew that these people were all waiting to see a good show. They wanted to see how she would be taught a lesson by the third prince. She didn't care. She was just that kind of person. When it was time to make a move, she would make a move. She couldn't watch such a tender little bun be bullied. Amen. She had just pinched the little bun's face. That soft touch couldn't be any better. However, what she didn't understand was why the third prince was looking at her as if he was looking at a strange auntie. Furthermore, there was a familiar playfulness in his eyes. When she wanted to take a closer look, that aloof man had already retracted his gaze. Half of his silver mask didn't reveal the slightest ripple. His entire body was sitting in a very lazy and luxurious posture. His elbow was propped up on the side as he indifferently said, "Come here." Eh? Who was the third prince calling? Before everyone could react, they saw the little one running over and calling out like a tiger, "Brother, brother?" The crimson red on Hellion Jiaoer's face instantly retreated. Everyone's expression froze. Even Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows in surprise. She didn't expect that this little foodie was actually from the royal family. It was really surprising. This little senior brother usually only knew how to fight and eat. He really didn't seem like someone who came from the royal palace. Emin, Beligaju indifferently replied and continued to turn the ring on his finger. Even his tone was as indifferent as usual. "What does Minister Jing think seventh brother has done to offend me? You can tell me in detail." Minister Jing didn't want to say anything. He had long since been scared stiff. His legs were trembling, and he only wanted to kneel. Beligaju looked at him mockingly, but said to Eunuch Sun, "Eunuch Sunday, this old servant is here." Eunuch Sun bowed to receive the order. Beligaju's voice didn't change at all. It was still neither cold nor hot. "Tell Minister Fong, within 3 days, I will personally come to his house and confiscate his house." "Yes." Eunuch Sun's skin tightened. Fong Tingting was dumbfounded, as if she had been struck by lightning. She knelt on the ground with a thud. "Your Highness, my father has always been an honest official. You can't do this, you can't do this." Beligaju fed the little one a mouthful of jerky and then turned to look at him with a faint smile. "Honest and honest?" As soon as Hellion Jiaoer heard this, she knew it wasn't good. She wanted to tell Fong Tingting to stop talking, but she also didn't want to get involved in this muddy water. Fong Tingting had always been spoiled by her family. In a moment of desperation, she shouted, "Father has done so much for the imperial court. What's wrong with receiving some money?" Hearing this, Minister Jing also became anxious. How could this Fong family's young miss be so stupid? This time, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. Hellion Vivian yawned. She thought that watching a good show should be accompanied by snacks. She conveniently took a piece of pastry and put it in her mouth. Beligaju's indifferent voice sounded again. "Eunuch Sun, when you go to Minister Fong's house, bring young Miss Fong along. Let her repeat what she just said to Minister Fong, so that Minister Fong will know where he made a mistake. If he raises a daughter who only knows how to eat like the eldest young miss of the Hellion family, perhaps he can still keep the head on his neck." Cough. Hellion Vivian choked on the pastry in her mouth. If this third prince wanted to punish people, then punish them. Why did he have to use her as a comparison? Moreover, he used that kind of, besides eating, "What else do you know how to do?" Arrogant and cold tone. However, it had to be said that this man really was ruthless enough when handling matters. Generally, if someone wanted to kill someone, they would just kill them. He still insisted on letting people know why he wanted to kill them. Wasn't this clearly showing that he wanted to add to people's hearts? Did he feel that just confiscating property wasn't enough to vent his hatred? While he was at it, he wanted to kill the Fong family as a warning to the Su family, as well as Minister Jing, who was related to both families. Hellion Vivian was indeed very smart, because Beligaju's next sentence was, "Master Jing, do you want to write a memorial and send it to the palace right now, so that Prime Minister Su and you can plead leniency on behalf of Minister Fong?" This commoner doesn't dare. This commoner doesn't dare. At this time, even Minister Jing also knelt down. There wasn't a trace of color on his lips. He completely didn't have the high-spirited complacency of the past few days. Fong Tingting knew that this time, her family was completely doomed. But until she was dragged away, she still didn't know what had gone wrong. They had received far more information than ordinary people. As early as several days ago, they had been waiting for the arrival of the royal family so that they could seize the opportunity to get in touch with them. How could he have accidentally offended someone like that? And no one had ever told them that the seventh prince was also at White Academy. No matter how Fong Tingting thought about it, she couldn't figure it out. Because now, besides regret, all that was left was fear of Beligaju. Not only her, even Minister Jing didn't dare to say another word. He clearly knew that the third prince didn't do anything to him because this was White Academy. Anyone who came to White Academy had to abide by White Academy's rules. They couldn't disobey their teachers and couldn't exercise imperial power. This was the rule set by the retired emperor. From beginning to end, no one dared to violate it. Therefore, Beligaju didn't want to throw Fong Tingting into the dungeon. Instead, he let people escort her to the Fong residence in the name of asking for leave. As for the matter of dealing with Minister Fong, it was a matter outside of White Academy. The third prince didn't have any misgivings. It was White Academy's rules that saved his life. When Minister Jing stood up, his back was covered in cold sweat. His hands and feet were bound as he sat in his original position. He simply couldn't wait for this banquet to end immediately. And Helian Jiaoer was doing her utmost to make up for the consequences of standing on the wrong side just now. She softly smiled and instructed the people behind her, "Tell the kitchen to make more dishes. It's important to let the seventh prince have a good meal." After she finished speaking, she smiled at Bailey Kong Chun. But the little one didn't care about her at all. With a fierce little face, he said, "Brother, there's no need to trouble the kitchen's martial uncle. I'll just eat the meat buns." Helian Jiaoer's raised hand stiffened. Her smiling face almost couldn't hold it anymore. Helian Mei immediately helped her out. "Second sister, the seventh prince is really sensible. When I was young, I ate whatever I wanted to eat. I never thought that the kitchen's master would have to work hard. And before, I didn't know little brother's identity. I just thought that this child was really steady and sensible. Just now, he was also extremely hungry, so he actually did such a cute thing." Helian Jiaoer also deserved to be called shameless for a long time. Before, she was still ridiculing the little one, but now the topic changed. Her praise was watertight. Helian Vivian was really bored listening to this kind of flattery. After eating her fill, she simply lay down on the desk nearby. Propping up the side of her face, she began to drowsily sleep. Clearly, she had already thrown the matter of the imperial consort selection to the back of her mind. The little one sitting beside Beligaju looked at her for a while. Then he turned his head and said, "Brother, look at that woman. She's asleep again. It seems like she doesn't want to become the imperial consort at all." And Beligaju's tone was indifferent as he opened his eyes. It was impossible to tell whether he was happy or angry. Only, that pair of long and narrow eyes under the silver mask seemed to have lost all warmth, cold and somewhat empty. Chapter 60. Eunuch Sun, who was standing by Bailey Jiaju's side, just happened to see this scene. He was only thinking about how he should save the situation, so he did his utmost to raise his voice by a few decibels. "Before I left the palace, the emperor had instructed me that I wanted to see the abilities of all the young ladies. Fighting and killing is always not good. However, I also inquired from Master Jing. Every year, White Academy will allow new students to enter the spirit forest to contract with their own spirit beast. It would be better to handle this matter in advance this year. After I see the results, I can also report to retired emperor." All the subjects of the Dragon War Empire knew that the retired emperor loved the third prince the most. For so many years, he had been urging the third prince to choose a consort. If it wasn't for the fact that the third prince didn't approach women, he wouldn't be without a consort at this age. Now that the third prince finally agreed to choose a consort, the retired emperor was the happiest. Regarding the consort selection, of course, he had many demands. Only, when everyone heard about contracting a mythological beast, they all shrank back. Although they were all students of the superior compound, there was still a gap between people. Some people simply couldn't contract a mythological beast unless their divine sense reached a certain level. It seems that the retired emperor already knew that the White Academy produced a genius, Zhao Heir, so he deliberately created such a difficult problem. He simply recognized Sister Zhao Heir. The Hellion Zhao intimately pinched the face of the person who spoke. You only know how to make fun of me. How am I making fun of you? You see, ever since the royal came in, he simply didn't look at anyone else. He kept looking at us. If he wasn't looking at you, could it be that he was looking at that dark and swarthy waste? That person mockingly glanced at Hellion Vivian, who was lying on the wooden table. You only know how to sleep all day. Look at the things on her table. Almost all of them were eaten by her. She really hasn't seen the world. Sister Zhao Heir, Sister Mei, how can you bear to live with such a person in the Defense Division residence? The Hellion Zhao disappointedly sighed and pretended to be upset. Don't say any more. Because Big Sister's aptitude is too poor, it's hard to avoid feeling inferior. That's why she's like this. Big Sister Zhao Heir, you're just too kind and beautiful. No wonder the royal family doesn't look at anyone but you. Hellion Zhao Heir's face reddened slightly as she listened and said, nonsense. However, her heart was full of pride. She shyly looked at the high and mighty man. When she met his eyes, her cheeks burned even hotter. However, Beligaju never left the woman sleeping on the floor. The coldness in his eyes became more and more demonic as time passed. If he kept a pet, he would have to constantly give her a warning. If he made her feel too comfortable, she would look down on him. A good hunter certainly knows how to deal with this kind of disobedient pet. As long as her thorns are pulled out one by one, she can be at peace. With a meat bun in his mouth, Little Bald Head looked at Hellion Wei Wei, who was sleeping soundly, then looked at the seemingly smiling yet not smiling Bailey Jiaju, who always gave people a kind of holy and pure existence like a god. His round tiger eyes paused, then turned toward Hellion Wei Wei's direction to take another look. Then, he tilted his small head and evaluated with a cold little face. Not bad. What's not bad? Eunuch Sun, who was doing his best to hold the meat bun for his little highness, twitched his mouth. Please don't be what I think. That Hellion Vivian, I've seen her go to the commerce courtyard. Little Bald Head took a big bite of the meat bun and didn't raise his head. She can make money and can support Third Brother. Moreover, Third Brother has already been taken care of by her. What taken care of? Eunuch Sun desperately swallowed his saliva. Little Highness, although your master's younger brother, you can't talk like that. You have to know that when master is angry, he won't recognize his emotions. I just don't know if she can cook. While Little Bald Head was at a loss, his small brows wrinkled. He seriously looked at Beligaju. Third Brother, I still think you should consider it. It's better to find someone who can cook. What's better? Eunuch Sun chuckled twice. This was choosing a consort, not a chef. No, this wasn't the main point. The main point was, why didn't his master have any reaction at all? Eunuch Sun looked at Bailey Jiaju again. He only managed to catch a glimpse of the curve at the corner of his mouth. It was as if he had seen an interesting toy. His handsome charm was enough to make any girl fall for him. He still remembered that the last time His Highness showed this expression, he was only 7 years old. In Mountain Phoenix, he caught a fire cheelin with his bare hands. He even trained that fire cheelin into a divine beast that only ate vegetables. A fire cheelin, a divine beast that didn't like meat. With just a stomp of its foot, it could make a city collapse. It would always listen to someone's orders. The most ferocious divine beast in ancient times. It was reduced to a point where it could only eat vegetables. It could be imagined, at that time, Master, cough cough, how abnormal was he? However, just like the rumors in the market, after that fire, the divine beast fire cheelin disappeared. Carefully counting, he hadn't seen that god of plague for a long time. However, His Highness unexpectedly showed the same evil smile as that time. Inexplicably, Eunuch Sun shuddered. In a while, he had to hold his master back. He couldn't let him do anything. These were all young ladies from famous families who came to participate in the competition, not some kitten or puppy. Hey, wait a minute. Eunuch Sun looked at Beligaju, who suddenly stood up, and his eyelids couldn't help but jump. Master, Where do you think you're going? As Beligaju stood up, all the voices in the banquet disappeared. The young ladies who were nibbling on the pastries all stopped what they were doing and held their breaths as they watched the handsome and restrained figure pass by them. The light fragrance of the sandalwood dragon was faintly discernible, and it smelled so good that no one dared to profane it. Helian Jiaoer looked at the man who was getting closer and closer to her, and her heart was beating so fast that it almost jumped out of her throat. She pretended to be reserved as she looked left and right, then bit her thin lips. Her pair of beautiful eyes looked at Beligaju pitifully. She always knew when to look at a man with what kind of attitude, so that it would arouse the other party's desire to protect her. In the past, she relied on this trick to make Morong Changfeng misunderstand Helian Vivian. That bitch. Now, she was confident that she could make the royal family put her at the top of their hearts. Moreover, wasn't she already halfway there? Just like what they said, since the royal family came in, they kept looking at her. It could be seen that the royal family was not indifferent to her. Helian Jiaoer thought of this, and the smile on her face became more and more bashful. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.